King of France. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Elite Division. After saying that, Ning continued to observe the battlefield with a telescope. He suddenly noticed that at the very edge of the formation, another troop had completed its deployment. Ning pointed at that troop and asked Kano, "What troop is that?" "Those wearing skirts are female soldiers. They are fewer in number, so it's normal that they can deploy faster." Ning, "Not bad. It seems that the female soldiers are well organized. It may have something to do with the fact that the male soldiers ridicule them whenever they get the chance, saying that the old ladies can't fight." Kano shrugged. "I still think that female soldiers are more suitable to be organized into skirmishers. After all, skirmishers only need to be able to shoot, and they don't even have to consider hand-to-hand combat, which can greatly weaken the physical disadvantages of women." Ning, "If the cavalry is just for reconnaissance." "Cavalry is not only for reconnaissance, it is wrong to only regard them as reconnaissance troops. They are also an important shock force and need to take on combat missions." Ning raised his eyebrows. "I asked Davu to watch the ladies training. Davu said they can be used as shock forces. This is the judgment of professional cavalry." Kano curled his lips and stopped talking. Since the professional cavalrymen have judged that female cavalrymen are available, he, who specializes in clerical work such as troop organization, has nothing to say. However, after a brief silence, he asked again, "Is Davu willing to command an infantry unit?" "He is a cavalryman, and his father is also a cavalry officer. I think he is quite happy." Ning replied. Davu in history was a well-rounded talent. He could handle both cavalry and infantry, unlike Murat, who was a stubborn cavalryman. At this time, an artillery lieutenant rode a horse to Ning and said, "The artillery unit has been deployed. Can we start the drill?" "Okay, fire the guns to add a little battlefield atmosphere to everyone," Ning ordered. The lieutenant immediately experienced and rode away. Soon the artillery volley began. The highest commander of the artillery was Ning himself. He ordered the artillery to be deployed in a concentrated manner and placed on the hillside of the small hill where he was. All 100 artillery pieces were concentrated on the hillside, and the scene of volley firing was quite spectacular. Kano, "The shells will whistle over the heads of the infantry teams that are being deployed. I guess many people will wet their pants." Ning's troops, of course, had no experience of being bombarded by artillery, nor had they had any experience of shells whistling over their heads. When Ning saw the cannons firing, many people turned their heads back to look. He even saw someone fall down in fear. "Ning, I am very dissatisfied with the fact that some people fell down because of the sound of the cannons. You can deal with it after the exercise." Kano, "This is easy. After the exercise, just let the non-commissioned officers check who wet their pants. But don't be too demanding on them. Cannons are a killer for those who have never seen them." Ning nodded and continued to observe the exercise field. At this time, the southeast wind was blowing on the battlefield, blowing from behind Ning and his men, so the smoke produced by the cannon firing was blown towards the infantry troops that were being deployed. Ning was very satisfied with this situation. The smoke could further test the organization and training of the troops. The cannon started firing the second round of volleys, with hundreds of cannons spraying shells into the fields opposite. In the swirling smoke, the infantry's offensive column could be seen gradually taking shape. Kano took out his pocket watch and looked at it, whispering, "The time from the start of the entry to the full deployment is not bad. It is what a well-trained army should be like." Ning, "It's much faster than when I ambushed the counter rebels in the apple orchard before." Of course, at that time, the rebels were being bombarded by our artillery. I only had 8 cannons at the time, but I shot quite accurately. If I had the hundreds of cannons I have now, they would not have had time to deploy. The rest depends on whether the offensive column can be aligned." Ning laughed to himself. Kano asked with a puzzled look on his face, "What's wrong?" "I'm reminded of the terrible formation my troops marched in during the Battle of the Apple Orchard. After only a few hundred meters, the formation was completely messed up, like a wavy line, with a huge crest protruding in the middle." Ning burst into laughter, and Kano also laughed. After a moment, everyone laughed together, as if Ning had just made a very funny joke. After laughing, Ning frowned, From then on, I decided not to launch a regular line attack. In the end, I won the victory by an ambush. In that battle, our infantry only rushed a dozen meters before engaging the enemy. It was basically a matter of running madly for a few seconds. At this time, Beethoven, who had not spoken much, said, "Play to your strengths and avoid your weaknesses." Ending. Now let's see the results of nearly a year of training. At this time, Davout, the commander of the 1st Infantry Brigade and deputy commander of the entire army, rode over on horseback and saluted Ning. Report. Just at this time, the artillery started a new round of volleys. Davout's words were completely drowned out by the rumbling of artillery. Davout frowned, but did not complain. Instead, he waited for the volley to end and spoke again. Report. The entire army has completed the formation. And Ning nodded. I saw it, although I couldn't see it very clearly. At this time, the white smoke from the artillery fire had obscured the entire battlefield. The entire formation could not be seen from the hill where Ning was, as there was always a part blocked by the thick smoke. Davout nodded. The smoke is too thick. After all, there are 100 artillery pieces. And Ning, how about it? With this visibility, are you confident that you can march in line for the attack? Davout smiled. My brigade will definitely be no problem. And Ning, then your brigade will go first. Let me make it clear first, the artillery will not cease fire, and it is possible that a shell will fall into your brigade's formation during the march. And Ning set the bombardment area for the artillerymen to be directly in front, and all the artillery had their muzzles raised, so generally the shells would fall between 800 and 1000 meters. But the artillery of this era had no rifling, and the shells were not tightly fitted to the inner wall of the barrel, so when firing, the shells would bounce back and forth in the barrel, so the direction of movement was random when leaving the barrel. Just like a flintlock rifle, the landing point of the artillery really depends on luck. The training subject that Ning gave them was to maintain formation and walk a distance of 500 meters. Theoretically, they might be bombarded when they reached the last 100 meters. So Ning's words were not meant to scare people. Davout answered confidently, "Don't worry, General, the 1st Brigade will not let you down." And Ning nodded, and let him, "1st Brigade, start the attack." Davout saluted and rode back to his own troops with full confidence. And Ning watched him go all the way back to his troops on the far right of the formation, dismounted and stood at the front of the queue. And Ning heard Davout's voice in the air, "1st Brigade, forward." And Ning, what a loud voice. But these days, officers, especially junior officers, must have loud voices, otherwise they will not be able to give orders on the battlefield. So Ning made a special rule for his training team: everything must be said very loudly and with great spirit. In addition, Ning added a subject that he did not have when he was in Brienne. Every morning when he got up, he would go to the playground and shout at the trees on the playground. The inspiration for this trick also came from the movie On Navy, in which the Atajima Naval School also had this subject of practicing shouting on the playground in the morning. Over time, everyone thought that Ning liked people with loud voices. Not to mention that the big-headed soldiers had loud voices all day long. Even the ladies who came to Ning to go to the dance all had loud voices. Yes, for example, Christina, because she forced herself to speak loudly, her voice became hoarse. As for Davout, he probably didn't mean it, he had a loud voice to begin with. Not only that, the non-commissioned officers of the 1st Brigade also had loud voices, and the sound of their messages, like the echo of Davout's roar, resounded throughout the battlefield. Then the 1st Brigade began to advance. At the beginning, because of the different starting orders, the people in the middle were closer to Davout, so they started earlier, and the whole queue formed a bow shape. But then the bow shape was flattened. The entire brigade of 2,000 people was arranged in 4 horizontal columns, which looked like 4 thick parallel lines from a distance. Each column had 3 rows of people, which was a standard line infantry attack column. And Ning observed with a telescope for a long time, and waited until the column walked out for hundreds of meters before nodding and praising, "Very good, Davout did a good job." Laser Carnot also nodded and said, "The training level is higher than I thought. Davout is indeed a talented general." And Ning nodded repeatedly, "Isn't that a talented general? Among Napoleon's marshals, Davout can be said to be the most capable and has the least hair." At this time, Ning suddenly noticed that Beethoven was standing next to him and looked like he wanted to talk, so he asked, "What's the matter?" I'm sorry to interrupt you to inspect the troops. The 1st Brigade is using the new offensive march I wrote. How do you feel about it?" And Ning then discovered that the music played by the military band was different from usual. The new music sounded very cheerful and contained a fearless spirit. And Ning, very good. Thank you for your compliment. Beethoven looked relieved, but every time you give me comments, they are very good, and you never find faults. And Ning thought to himself, you are a music saint, how can I find faults with you? But on the surface he said, my principle is to let professionals do professional things. If it is to arrange artillery positions, I will definitely express my opinions. But as for music, no, I'd better not make a fool of myself. And Ning's translation plugin translated the idiom make a fool of myself into Latin. At this moment, the artillery fired another round of salvos. Kano, should we have a cannon turn its target and fire at the 1st Brigade? This way we can test their morale when facing artillery fire. And Ning hesitated. To be honest, doing this will definitely improve the combat effectiveness of the troops. It is normal to have some casualties in the exercise. But after a brief hesitation, he shook his head. No. France will definitely fall into civil strife next. We have many wars to fight, and many people will die in continuous wars. It is better for us not to waste their lives in the exercise, although it can indeed improve the level of the entire army. Carnot nodded, I understand. Beethoven looked very moved, you really love your soldiers like your sons. And Ning wanted to say that this was not really loving his soldiers like his sons, but he knew from past experience that this would be understood as humility, so he simply kept silent. At this time, Davout's troops had reached the offensive stop line, and the non-commissioned officer guarding the stop line raised a green flag to indicate that they had reached the line. And Ning and Lazare Carnot raised their binoculars together to observe Davout's formation. Carnot, it's a little messy, but it's still within the scope of an elite division. And Ning, well, send a message to Davout and tell him that I am very satisfied. Order the 2nd Brigade to advance. Chapter 127 It's a mess, it's all a mess. The attack formations of the following brigades were not as neat as the 1st Brigade, but they all managed to maintain the formation until the end. And Ning was very satisfied, at least they could fight offensive battles in the wilderness in the future. After the infantry brigade finished, it was the turn of the ladies who were still infantry. I don't know if it was because of the confrontational mentality, but the formation of the ladies in skirts was not as good as the 1st Brigade, but it looked much better than the other brigades. Kano suggested again, in my opinion, they are very good skirmishers. Since you can't get so many horses for the time being, use them as skirmishers. Skirmishers need less training, but they need a higher fighting spirit. After all, skirmishers fight in a dispersed manner, and they are physically farther away from their non-commissioned officers during the battle, so skirmishers need a higher desire to fight and cannot be forced to go to the battlefield. Because of this, except for Austria, which has a tradition of using skirmishers, skirmishers in other countries are often played by criminals and street urchins, all of whom are guys who have a subjective desire to kill and burn. So what Kano said actually made sense. Cavalry also requires a stronger desire to fight, because when most cavalry units run, the officers can't control the people below, and the formation will be scattered while running. Without the will to fight, they will run half of the charge. Therefore, the discipline of the cavalry is also poor, especially the hussars, who are basically horse bandits who have been regularized. In theory, since the ladies can be used as cavalry, they can also be skirmishers. And Ning, are you sure you can train the ladies into skirmishers before we go out to fight next time? Kano, skirmishers don't need much training. The key is the will to fight. And Ning, okay, let's give it a try. I don't want the ladies to fight hand-to-hand with the regular line infantry. Understood, I will train the ladies well. Laser Kano said confidently. At this time, the Sunset Knights, who were the last to hold the line, began to march into the offensive formation. Their formation was quite neat, even better than Davout's 1st Brigade. It can only be said that it is a team of all non-commissioned officers, and they have received many years of rigorous training in their respective non-commissioned officer schools. When the team was halfway through, the knights in white began to shout in unison, "We are the general's sharp blade. We are the evil spirits of the old times." And Ning frowned, who arranged this? Kano, it's not me, they should have prepared it themselves. And Ning, in the National Guard representing the new era, there is a group of evil spirits of the old times. After a while, when the civil war intensifies, are we the white party or the blue party? This is the classification method after the French Civil War has completely intensified. Those who support the National Assembly are the Blue Party, and those who support the restoration of the king are the White Party. Kano, that depends on your choice. At this time, Davu rode over and saluted Ning. The whole army's offensive formation drill is over, please give instructions. And Ning, begin to practice the square formation change. Understood. After Davu left, and Ning turned to the cavalry commander and the head of the Guard Knights, Valerie de Oliver, and ordered, let the girls prepare, let these big-headed soldiers experience the prestige of the cavalry charge. Yes. Valerie saluted, turned her horse's head and left. Beethoven muttered, she was completely silent. I didn't even realize she was here. And Ning, because she is a palace guard knight. In the palace, they cannot speak unless the superior speaks first. So that's how it is. And Ning called the herald again, order the artillery to stop firing. Yes. The sound of artillery firing gradually subsided. On the ground full of smoke, the troops that were originally in a horizontal formation began to change into a square formation. Laser Carnot was still holding a pocket watch to count. The 2,500 cavalry led by the Guard Knights made a rumbling sound and cut in from one side of the battlefield, rushing towards the infantry team that had just formed a square formation. This scene was indeed very spectacular. Only 2,500 cavalry had such a prestige. It is conceivable how powerful the 40,000 French cavalry charged together at Waterloo. No wonder Ney thought that the battle could be ended by charging. It's a pity that the square formation is too effective for the cavalry who don't have heavy vests now. And Ning saw his troops lined up in a square formation, just like the rocks on the river beach. The cavalry formation was like flowing water, which separated when it encountered the rocks. And Ning was feeling the atmosphere of the battlefield, and Laser Cano was evaluating the training level of the troops. Not bad. Facing the cavalry charge, no one fell behind. Of course, it may also be because they knew it was an exercise. And Ning, we will know whether they can really withstand it after we actually try it on the battlefield. However, to encounter a well-organized cavalry brigade on the battlefield, we will probably have to wait until the anti-French alliance breaks in. And Ning, I think it's almost done. Blow the horn, and withdraw the troops. The bugler who had been following, and Ning immediately took out his weapon and blew the horn to withdraw the troops. Laser Cano still held his pocket watch and observed the entire exercise field. It seems that the speed of the troops' withdrawal is also one of his assessment items. And Ning looked at the troops in action and thought to himself that I am ready for war. The next thing to decide is how to use this trained army. Historically, the National Assembly took the initiative to declare war on foreign countries and spread the revolution in countries around France after November 1791. Before that, Ning did not intend to consume his own troops. He was prepared to ignore the rebellion in the country. Anyway, there is no rebellion around Conta, right? The National Assembly can worry about the rebellion in other places. As for the war with Prussia and Austria, Ning also planned to sideline OB. Anyway, according to the course of history, the French Revolutionary Army led by Dumouriez won this time, and he only needed to assist Dumouriez. As for when to fully invest in this army he had managed, Ning calculated that it should be when the emperor was about to make a fortune, and then go to help the place and give his all. That's right, the Battle of Toulon is the time when I will give my all. At that time, the emperor will definitely remember me as a minister of the Dragon's Rise and give me great benefits. Ning thought so, and a smile appeared on his face. At this moment, a messenger rode up to Ning and saluted. General, a second lieutenant wants to see you. He said he is your acquaintance. And Ning didn't realize the problem yet, and replied casually, let him come over. Before the messenger left, the second lieutenant rode over on horseback. I'm here, Andy, it's me. And Ning glanced at the man and almost fell off the horse. It's Napoleon Bonaparte. That's not right. Shouldn't you be licking Polly in Corsica now? Why are you back now? Napoleon smiled and said, I heard that you are in short supply of officers now, so I just landed in Toulon and ran here without stopping. I came to join you. And Ning couldn't close his jaw. What about Corsica's independence? Napoleon, don't mention it. Polly doesn't understand the revolution at all. He just wants to restore the old ways in Corsica. There is no revolution with these insects. I thought about it for a long time, and I am more excited about what is happening in France. So I came. Just tell me, what should we do next? Quotation mark. Chapter 128 Do it, Your Excellency. And Ning's mood was extremely complicated at this time. Napoleon came back early, and instead of reporting back to his own troops, he came directly to me. Now everything is messed up. How will history develop next? What should I do before the Battle of Tua? No matter what I do, history will move to a new chapter. My script, the script is gone. What the hell should I do? At this time, Napoleon still asked, Andy, General, what should we do? And Ning thought, I want to ask that too. At this time, Davout rode his horse to Ning and said, the troops have gathered, do you want to give a speech? And Ning, no, I am very satisfied. The main thing is that his mind is in a mess and he doesn't know what to say at all. Davout said oh, then turned to look at Napoleon, who is this? And Ning, this is Napoleon Bonaparte I told you about. Really? The artillery genius? Then the commander of the artillery unit has been selected. I think we are ready to go to war. Davout looked very happy. Paris has urged us many times to quell the rebellion. When Napoleon heard about quelling the rebellion, he was very excited. Are we going to quell the rebellion? Then let's just sweep all the rebels in France. I just watched the troops' exercises from a distance. With this training, we can definitely wipe out all the rebels. And Ning has never told anyone about his future plans, so everyone present didn't know that he was going to stay at home. In fact, fighting a civil war has its benefits. According to Napoleon's own recollection, he felt that he had a destiny in a battle he forgot, and this established his intention to become a superior person. So maybe after fighting a few wars, Napoleon will feel his destiny and become an emperor as in history. But this cannot be guaranteed to happen. What if Napoleon sensed something else during the fighting? At this time, facing everyone's expectant eyes, and Ning had to speak, so he had to speak, thinking as he spoke, no, you don't understand, this. That's right. You don't understand why the current civil war broke out. Davout, although I am a military man and don't understand politics, I also know that this is because of the clergy law. There are priests in the country who still want to continue to be responsible to the Pope's office and are unwilling to swear allegiance to the National Assembly. These French traitors are really bad. Davout, worthy of being a passionate military man, and loyal to France. And Ning shook his head again and again, no. Napoleon clapped his hands vigorously, I understand. The fundamental problem is the Roman Catholic Church. We are going to expedition to Italy, kill the church, and take back all the land that Pepin donated back then. No, wait a minute. And Ning interrupted them hurriedly, that's not the case. Napoleon. Forget about Davout. After all, my exchanges with him were all about military affairs. You are different. I told you that the fundamental problem lies in the economy. Economy. Napoleon laughed, I know, I was just joking. In fact, after I landed in Toulon, I have been checking the people's sentiments in the southern region. Just like what you said, most farmers did not get any land at all, because the parliament stipulated that the land needed to be redeemed. They had no choice but to rent the land at a high rent, and then pay even heavier taxes. I also found out that the nobles in the countryside used to come forward and negotiate with the grain merchants, but now the nobles are all gone, and the grain merchants are arbitrarily lowering prices. The lives of the farmers are worse than before. So they couldn't bear it anymore and started to rebel. From Toulon to here, it's all rebel activity areas. Many local grain merchants, members of parliament and Christians have been massacred. I was in danger several times, but fortunately I took out the certificate from the personnel bureau to prove that I am a noble. And Ning was shocked. Is this the Napoleon? The Napoleon who'd investigate people's living conditions? Did I have a fucking influence on Napoleon's personality during those years in Brienne? Come to think of it, this boy has been listening to me talking nonsense since he was 10 years old. His cognition must be affected. But don't Chinese men only talk about a few topics? What am I doing? I can't keep chatting in front of a kid just because it's fun. And Ning, because she suddenly realized how stupid she was, she wanted to make a time machine to punch herself who had just traveled through time. Napoleon didn't realize what Ning was thinking. He asked Ning excitedly, you must have a way to solve this problem fundamentally. Let's do it. Andy. No, General. And Ning thought to himself, it's easy for you to say that. I'm a programmer who traveled through time. The only thing I can do well is the economy in the game Victoria 2. How can I solve the real economic problems? The most important thing is that Ning has never really wanted to do something in France since he traveled through time. All he wants is to sit on the fence, fish in slack, and take advantage of the script he has read. To use the words in the style of a light novel title to explain Ning's life goal after traveling through time, it's easy to become a rich man and a powerful official without being tired or troublesome. The slow life of a former social animal. It would be even better if I could have a beautiful and lovely wife. Now, after investigating Ning's script, they tore it up, and then let him use a clever trick to improve the economy and fundamentally quell the civil unrest in France. To this, he just wants to say, get lost. And Ning is bitter. I'm just a programmer. I took physics in the college entrance examination. Do you understand physics? Do you think I'm a pawn? Do you dare to pretend to be an expert based on hearsay? Do you dare to define hypersonic speed by searching on Baidu? I don't have that ability, do you know? While Ning looked distressed, everyone continued to look at Ning with expectant eyes. Napoleon was still standing by and said as an acquaintance, I know you must have thought of a solution a long time ago. After all, you have been thinking about this problem since the Brienne era. I'm not thinking, I'm just chatting with you. Suddenly you want me to come up with something that I can tell you all right away and then do it. If I had studied economics, maybe I would have some ideas, but I haven't studied it. Suddenly, Ning thought of something. Hey, I seem to have learned how to do economics in the history textbooks of junior high school and high school. In the high school Chinese textbook, there is also the text dividing the horses by Zhou Libo, not the Zhou Libo in one Zhou Libo show. If you think about it carefully, the current problem is mainly because the peasants don't have their own land. Then wouldn't it be better to just beat the local tyrants and divide their land? The only problem is that in history, France achieved land distribution because it was a compromise that was finally forced to make when the Civil War intensified and there was foreign interference. This will have to wait for a few more years, at least until after the Vendée Rebellion in 1793. If we start to beat the local tyrants and divide the land, then history will be off track. But Ning immediately put this worry behind her. Damn, it's as if history is not off track now. Ning glanced at everyone present, sighed and said, in fact, the solution is very simple, that is, to distribute all the land to the farmers, and then establish a minimum grain purchase price. Lazare Cano immediately shook his head. That would violate the Bill of Parliament. According to the bill, farmers should obtain land through redemption. Limiting the purchase price also violates the principle of free trade in the market. This is simply going against Parliament. Ning, I know that Parliament believes that private property is inviolable, and land is one of the private properties, so a redemption policy was formulated. But it is this policy that has led to the current situation of farmers being worse than before the revolution, so there are flames of rebellion everywhere. In such a situation, the nobles who fled to foreign countries and foreign forces will definitely stir up trouble. The fact is that we must rebalance incomes and improve the living conditions of farmers before France can achieve stability. To put it in plain words, the peasants must benefit from the revolution. Only then will they support the revolution. Lazare Carnot pushed his glasses. Maybe that's the case. You convinced me, so how do you plan to convince the Parliament? Ning, I can't do anything about the Paris Parliament for now, but I can convince the Canton Parliament quickly. Carnot, convince them to violate the Parliament's bill? Paris will not ignore it. Ning smiled. No, I promise that everything we are going to do next will comply with the Parliament's bill. It's just a little tricky. Napoleon looked excited. I knew you had a way. Do it. Davu, whatever you want to do, we support you. At this time, the Canton National Assembly was discussing how to deal with the increasingly chaotic surrounding situation as usual. At this moment, Ning suddenly opened the door and strode in. Mr. Cullen, the Speaker of the Parliament and owner of the largest business in the city, who was speaking, was startled and exclaimed, General, how come, weren't you watching the military exercises outside the city? Ning, the exercises are over. I am very worried about the current situation around me, so I rush back immediately. Let me introduce you, this is Second Lieutenant Napoleon Bonaparte. He just came from Toulon and scouted the local customs along the way. I believe you are also concerned about this matter, right? Napoleon Bonaparte walked to Ning and adjusted his second lieutenant rank insignia. Mr. Cullen said quickly, Great, please come up and tell us. There are rumors everywhere recently that there will be another rebellion around Canton. Napoleon nodded, stood on the podium neither arrogant nor humble, and cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, I have seen many places where riots occurred along the way, and I found one thing, all the riots are because the peasants did not get the land. They still bear the feudal rent and have to pay the feudal taxes, but the price of grain purchased by grain merchants is very low. So the peasants are making trouble, and the priest's oath is just an inducement. I think that as long as the land is distributed to the peasants and the peasants' taxes are reduced, these riots will subside by themselves. There is no need for the army to suppress it. The gentlemen of the parliament looked at each other. Someone immediately raised his hand and said, however, according to the Bill of Parliament, the feudal obligations of the peasants have been completely exempted, and they can redeem their own land. If they don't redeem it themselves, it's not our fault. And Ning said loudly, Sir, why do you think the peasants can't afford the redemption money? Of course it's because grain merchants like you are buying at a lower price. Parliament guarantees free trade in the market. This is in line with the principle of freedom. And Ning, I'm not here to argue with you. In fact, I have a better proposal today. You should know that I have founded a company that is responsible for managing the confiscated church properties. I wonder if my company can buy the properties that the farmers cannot redeem, and then distribute the land to the farmers. Upon hearing Ning's words, everyone in the hall was delighted. Everyone knew that Ning had confiscated a large amount of gold from the church. Mr. Cullen immediately stood up. That's great. General, you have done a great deed. And Ning smiled and said, You're welcome. But I want to remind you that I will use coupons to pay for all redemptions. As soon as Ning finished speaking, the door of the room opened, and the soldiers carried in a large box of assignats. These were the military salaries that Paris had paid to Ning over the past year, but Ning directly used gold and silver coins to settle the soldiers' salaries instead of assignats, so the assignats were left with Ning. Seeing these assignats, the faces of the wealthy people in the entire hall changed. Someone slammed the table in anger and stood up. You are robbing. And Ning was furious. What? You don't recognize the assignats? Not recognizing the assignats means not recognizing the Paris National Assembly, which is treason. Come on. The doors of the hall opened with a bang, and the troops armed with live ammunition rushed in murderously. And Ning pointed at the person who just shouted you are robbing. Catch this traitor. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Parliament's Counterattack. After the land was divided, and Ning immediately discovered a fatal weakness, there were not enough clerks. For more than a year, and Ning had been teaching the non-commissioned officer nominated by the soldiers' committee to read and write, but this kind of quick teaching could only allow the non-commissioned officers to understand the orders, and was not enough to cope with the large amount of paperwork when distributing land. The lack of talent led to very slow progress in the land distribution. However, the news of the adults' land distribution had spread, and as a result, farmers came to Kantaw from afar to ask when they would get their land. The lack of talent also limited Ning's subsequent plans. He originally wanted to establish an agricultural cooperative bank to provide farmers with loans to buy seeds and so on, basically referring to the practice of a certain sect in his memory. Then Ning discovered that a certain sect could do this because they had a large group of progressive young people with revolutionary enthusiasm and knowledge. And Ning didn't have it. If you have to say, the literacy rate in France is actually okay now, mainly because of the Sunday schools in the church, but the intellectuals who have enough knowledge to be used as codders, I'm sorry, are only the petty bourgeoisie in the city. Many petty bourgeoisie opposed Ning's land distribution plan because it touched private property. They were worried about when Ning would attack them again. Only the old farmers and Ning's fans supported Ning's approach. After worrying for a long time, Ning suddenly found a group of people who were knowledgeable and supported his approach. That was the old nobles. They were deprived of their property by the revolution, and many people's property was directly seized by the big businessmen in the city. Now they are happy to let them spit out what they have eaten. Anyway, I can't get it, and you can't get it either. So in the countryside of Conta, a strange scene happened. A group of old nobles were dividing the land among their former serfs. Since the land distribution began, Ning could no longer be free, and there were so many things waiting for him to make a decision every day. Ning regained the feeling of being a social animal before the time travel. Ning couldn't help but think of those historical time travel novels in the early years, such as the works of Angel Oscar, in which the time travelers were all tireless workaholics who wanted to make a career. When reading these novels, Ning was still a college student. At that time, he was deeply moved and would imagine what it would be like if he returned to ancient times. But now, Ning, a social animal, just wants to give up. What the hell is land reform? Give me back my leisurely life of traveling through time. The only consolation is that now there are no nagging bosses and damn project managers chanting in my ears, and the level of busyness is not as excessive as when I was working 996. At noon that day, Ning had just met a group of old farmers who came to volunteer. These old farmers actually came from outside the jurisdiction of Konta. They all wanted Ning to share the land. No matter how I explained to them that it was not in Ning's jurisdiction, they would not listen, as if Ning could move freely in France and could take care of whatever he wanted. After finally coaxing this group of people away, Beethoven came. As soon as Beethoven entered Ning's study, he said enthusiastically, "I have written a new musical short play. It is to praise your initiative of dividing the land. I want to go to Paris and organize a troupe to start performing." Ning shook his head and said, "No, the gentlemen in Paris will not like my move of dividing the land." Ning took out a letter and pushed it in front of Beethoven. "Take a look, it is written to me by my friends in Paris. Those guys who bought the land with my assignats ran to Paris to complain. Because most of my friends are not on the parliament now, they have successfully obtained the majority support. It is estimated that the parliament's envoy will arrive soon." In 1791, the constitution of the constitutional monarchy had been formulated and promulgated, so the Constituent Assembly ended its mission. Robespierre proposed a motion that in order to ensure the fairness and independence of the parliament, the members of the Constituent Assembly should not participate in the election of the next parliament. This proposal was passed. So in the newly elected National Assembly, only Marat, one of Ning's friends, was a member. The power of the Mountain Party in the new parliament was greatly weakened, and a large number of Girondists were elected to the new parliament. They mainly represent the big bourgeoisie and bankers. It is simply wishful thinking to expect them to support Ning's approach. So Ning still has to deal with the parliament. Ning explained all this to Beethoven, and the music master couldn't help but frown. Don't they realize that the country is so chaotic now because the land has not been divided? Ning, do you think our queen will realize that the people are rebelling because they are not full? Beethoven shrugged. I met the queen once, I think. She probably doesn't realize it. Ning smiled bitterly. Beethoven, then maybe through my play, the gentleman in Paris can understand. Don't waste your energy. I think this is the way to go. Don't write a musical that needs a stage. Write something that can be sung by 2 or 3 people on the roadside. There is no need for any performance. Just use the lyrics to tell stories, stories that old farmers love to hear. For example, there was a girl who had to hide in the mountains and forests because of the oppression of the nobles. Her hair turned white. Now the revolution has overthrown the landlords, the nobles, and the world has changed. His family has also been allocated land and can be happily reunited. Beethoven, is this a true story? I'm just giving an example. I believe that as long as you go to interview and ask more old farmers who come to drink in the tavern, you must find many such stories. Your task is to discover them and then compile them into short plays that can be performed on a simple stage for everyone to see. Music should serve the people and the revolutionary struggle. Beethoven was greatly inspired. That makes sense. We should walk out of the theater. Ning, you can even go to the land distribution offices in various places and perform directly for the old farmers who come to distribute the land. Okay, I'll go now. Then, I'll leave first. Beethoven said goodbye to Ning excitedly and turned away. Ning let out a long sigh, then took back the letter that he had just pushed to Beethoven and read the content on it. The letter was written by Robespierre. Several gentlemen from Quinta accused you of robbing them in Parliament, violating the basic principle of the inviolability of private property in the Constitution. The Parliament's special envoy will arrive in Quinta soon, and you'd better be prepared. Ning curled his lips. Although he didn't think that he could fool people by taking a detour with the assignats, the interference from the Parliament came too quickly. Sure enough, will there be huge resistance if the process is advanced in advance? In real history, it was a gradual process for France to start distributing land to farmers. First, the Girondists reformed the land policy and slightly eased the land problem, but the Girondists' decrees were strongly resisted by the landowners and could not move forward. Later, the Jacobins came to power and chopped off a lot of heads. Only then did they successfully implement the system of using land rent instead of redemption. Farmers first owned the land, and then used the rent to pay off their debts within 10 years. Only then was France's land problem basically solved, and the subsequent economic development was achieved. The whole process took 6 years. And Ning was good, and he went all the way and directly fought against the local tyrants to distribute the land, which was bound to be strongly opposed. If it was not handled well, it would probably go to war with Lafayette's National Guard. Chapter 130 Thoughts on both sides. In fact, the key issue is that Ning did it too early. He decided to divide the land on a whim under the circumstances at that time. It was really a whim. Then Napoleon firmly declared that Ning had been thinking about this matter since 1780, which led to this whim decision becoming a decision that he had thought about for 11 years. Now everyone thinks that this is an action taken by Ning after careful consideration. So Ning can't change it, and can only bite the bullet. Fortunately, in Ning's cognition, someone has already stepped on the mine, and there are ready-made experience summaries, so Ning wrote down part of those experience summaries based on his memory, distributed them to his subordinates, and barely pushed forward the land division. As a result, the distribution of experience summaries itself became evidence of Ning's careful consideration, making everyone more convinced that this was Ning's long-planned action. If it weren't for this kind of rush, but giving Ning time to think carefully, Ning would choose to stay put and wait until 1793. Although France is also in chaos now, with rebellions everywhere, the rebels have not formed a system to connect into pieces, and they are all acting separately. By 1793, there were a large number of organized rebels in France, especially in the Vendée region, and the number of rebels was so large that it could threaten Paris. If the land was divided at that time, Paris would probably have no time to care about Ning. It was useless to think about it now. The land had been divided, and the accountability from Paris should have come in the next week. If something went wrong, he might really have to fight a battle with the National Guard led by Lafayette. And Ning had sent several groups of spies to Paris to scout the situation and find out the bottom of Lafayette's National Guard. The news he got was that Lafayette did not focus on training the troops. He often spoke in Parliament, participated in various club activities, and went to various dances. In other words, the level of Lafayette's troops was basically the same as the more than 1,000 people that Ning brought to the Punch Tower a year ago. But during this year, Lafayette reorganized the Old Kingdom Army, asked the Old Army to change the white uniforms, and incorporated them into the National Guard. In this way, he expanded the National Guard of Paris to more than 60,000 people. Considering that the National Guard was also responsible for the public security of Paris, Lafayette should not be able to pull out all the troops to fight Ning, but there were always 30,000 or 40,000 people. Although the old army had been in turmoil for a while because the National Assembly used coupons to pay the army and was dissatisfied with the officers in the army, it was a fully trained army after all, and it should not be underestimated in a fight. Ning could only sigh heavily when he thought that he might be hostile to an enemy that was twice or even 5 times his strength. Damn, if I were really a peerless general, I would naturally not be afraid of a 2-to-1 force ratio, but unfortunately I am not. If I had a real-time strategy system that could command the army like playing Total War, then I would probably not be afraid of practicing with the enemy. Unfortunately, I only have a system that can only work in individual battles. I can't kill tens of thousands of people by myself. I'm exhausted, okay. The only consolation now is that I have recruited Davout, Lannes, and Napoleon under my command. But Lafayette also has Berthier. Although Berthier is not good at commanding, he is the most outstanding chief of staff and is best at turning the commander's orders into troop movements. His commander, Lafayette, had practiced with General Cornwallis of the British Army during the American War of Independence. On the other hand, Ning's combat experience so far has basically taken advantage of the first-hand surprise attack twice, especially the second time, which was a sneak attack and took a big advantage. Ning has no confidence that he can win a serious face-to-face battle with Lafayette. Sure enough, a surprise attack is still needed. Ning touched his chin and thought about how to deal with the upcoming war in this rare leisurely noon. Otherwise, let's attack at night and burn down Lafayette's military camp. In this era, troops had to camp in the wild when marching and fighting, and there were endless tents when the army camped. After all, Lafayette's troops were not really a real French Revolutionary Army, and they had not yet learned the trick of the French Revolutionary Army to find fellow villagers to stay overnight. It is theoretically feasible to launch a sneak attack in the middle of the night and burn down the camp. But there are 2 problems with this. One is that many people in Ning's army are night blind. They can't see far even with torches at night. Without torches, many people are blind. This problem is actually easy to solve. Just eat vegetables such as carrots for a week in advance to supplement vitamin A. The second problem is the real fatal problem: there is not enough organization. You can actually see it from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Night attacks are all about carefully selected warriors, and the team is generally not large. Because the military discipline of ordinary troops cannot be maintained at night, only a few elite troops can carry it out. The ones who carry out night attacks are basically the closest and most elite part of the general's own troops. Many of them may have followed this general for many years, which is enough to maintain the organization to launch a night attack. So if you want to launch a night attack, you must have a sufficiently elite and well-organized force. And Ning thought of Davu's 1st Brigade. You can give it a try. And Ning suddenly realized that this problem has been solved. I have a highly organized and elite army. I have a training team. Although after a night raid, the whole scene must be extremely chaotic, and it is hard to say how many people from the training team can come back, but at this time, there is no time to care about so much. And Ning stood up excitedly and began to pace in the room, rubbing his hands as he walked. Use the training team to launch a sneak attack and burn them to death. Although the number of people in the training team probably cannot kill tens of thousands of troops at once, it is also good to weaken the enemy. After weakening the enemy, fight the enemy on the plains. By then, our army will definitely have advantages in morale and fighting spirit, and then rely on the talents of our generals. There is a way. There is a way. And Ning became happier and happier as he thought about it, pacing back and forth in the room. At this moment, Paris. Lafayette also paced back and forth in his headquarters, muttering to himself, "At this time, a military victory can restore my reputation." Not long ago, the Parisian masses gathered in the Champ de Mars, demanding that the parliament take resolute measures to change the current situation of rebellion, and protesting against the hyperinflation caused by the excessive issuance of assignats. Lafayette ordered the National Guard to shoot and disperse the crowd, which resulted in the Champ de Mars tragedy. Many people in the National Assembly took this opportunity to impeach Lafayette's title as the Commander-in-Chief of the National Guard. They almost succeeded. If the representative from Quintal had not cried about General Andy Frost's trampling on the Constitution and diverted the attention of the Parliament, Lafayette might have gone home. The Parliament just sent a special commissioner to Quintal to stop this trampling on the Constitution. Lafayette prayed in his heart that Andy Frost would never obey the special commissioner's orders. If the cobbler did not obey the order, the Parliament would send troops to subdue him. Lafayette was obviously the most suitable candidate. After all, the cobbler was a so-called war hero, and the Parliament believed that he had outstanding military talent. Under such circumstances, it was impossible to replace Lafayette, who was familiar with the troops. Lafayette paced back and forth, muttering in a low voice, "Don't give in, Frost. Show the momentum you had when you said in front of His Majesty the King, 'Only the bayonet can make us leave.'" Chapter 131 Topographic Survey. "I refuse." And Ning said firmly to the special commissioner from Paris, "My actions did not violate the Constitution. I used the assignats issued by the Parliament to buy all the land. The face value of the assignats was as high as 400 million francs. Do you know what 400 million francs means?" And Ning added in his heart that in Jules Verne's novel Bacon's 500 million francs, 500 million francs can build 2 cities. One is a beautiful city like a paradise, and the other is like a super huge factory. This city can even produce a super cannon that can fire shells into the Earth's orbit. In Verne's fantasy, only 500 million francs can do such a thing. So it is very reasonable for Ning to take out 400 million francs of assignats to buy the land in the entire Quintal area. The special commissioner blew his beard and glared at Ning. "You are robbing." "What do you mean?" And Ning was shocked. "I bought it with money. How can it be called robbery? The assignats are worthless. You know it." The special commissioner couldn't hold back and said it out. "And Ning, what? You actually said that the assignats are worthless? You are questioning the policy of the National Assembly. You just hinted that the National Assembly was robbing. I don't think you are a special commissioner at all. Someone, come. Arrest him." The only officer in the room was Lazare Carnot, who is now the de facto chief of staff. When Ning shouted, he drew his sword and put it against the special commissioner's neck. Then Napoleon opened the door and rushed in, holding a loaded pistol in his hand. "General. What's going on?" Well, Napoleon acted quite devotedly, as if he really knew nothing about what was happening in the room. Ning, this man claims to be a special commissioner of the Paris Parliament. But all he said just now are treasonous remarks, and he even accused the Parliament of robbing the masses. I suspect he is a rebel. Arrest him, and ask him to stay in the dungeon while we verify his identity with the Parliament. Napoleon, understood. Sir, please come this way. The special commissioner looked pale. You are rebelling. Ning, I am loyal to the Parliament. I even took out my own money to help the peasants complete the redemption, and then distributed the land to the peasants for free. I spent 400 million francs, assignats. Ning said with a painful expression, as if the 400 million assignats were real money. The special envoy, who do you think you can fool? As soon as the letter you sent to the Parliament for verification arrives, they will know that you have betrayed. Ning, no, I think the gentlemen of the Parliament will understand my contribution. After all, they are all smart and knowledgeable gentlemen. The special envoy, Lafayette, will make you look good. Wait for him to deal with you. Ning, we are all National Guards. Can Mr. Lafayette send troops to fight me? Ning just wanted to pretend to be naive. Lazare Carnot looked at Ning with a complicated expression. He seemed to think that Ning's performance was too hard. But Napoleon was more powerful than Ning. Stop talking nonsense, you traitor, go. Prison is your destination. The special envoy stared at Ning with gritted teeth, and after a stalemate, he turned around and followed Napoleon. Lazare Carnot immediately went to the window and looked out. After a moment he reported, it looks like the people who followed the special envoy got on their horses and turned around and ran away. Ning, very good, just as planned. Tomorrow we will start counting the troops' ammunition and gunpowder stocks, send people to purchase food, and make preparations. Lazare Carnot, the opponent is Lafayette's National Guard horses? The estimated strength ratio is 2-to-1. This is not an easy battle. Ning, I know. So we need the right time, place and people. Ning's translation plugin translated all the words right time, place and people into Latin, which sounds very cool. Then Ning came to the map and asked Lazare Carnot, from Paris tour last night, where do you think Lafayette will camp? Lazare Carnot also came to the map. I can only answer you from the perspective of pure mathematics and geography. Recently, because I have to help divide the land, I have run all the terrain nearby. I think the last night before the decisive battle, Lafayette may camp here, here, and here. He took a pencil and drew 3 circles on the map. Ning, what's the reason? It conforms to the camping doctrine taught in the military academy. Carnot shrugged. I am a mathematician and military engineer. I don't have a genius like tactical awareness. If I were to choose, I would only camp in these places. Ning, wait a minute, you said it conforms to the camping doctrine taught in the military academy? Are you sure? In theory, Ning should have learned the same doctrine, but Ning has almost forgotten what he learned in the military academy. After all, he didn't want to be a great military strategist in the past few years. He just wanted to cling to Napoleon's thigh. Lazare Carnot nodded very affirmatively. Absolutely, that's what the textbook teaches. Ning curled his lips. He suddenly thought that Berthier was a very methodical person. This guy had very poor adaptability, so he could only be the chief of staff to execute other people's decisions. If it was Berthier, he would most likely camp in these 3 places. Ning, call Lannes and follow me. I want to take him to familiarize himself with the terrain of these places. Lazare Carnot immediately turned his head and shouted, Messenger. The door opened immediately, and a capable young man of 16 or 17 years old came in, stood at attention and saluted, Sir. Go call Captain Jean Lannes over, and ask the stable to prepare the horses, we are going out. Yes. The boy turned and ran away. Ning, new messenger. With the distribution of land, some children from farmers' families began to join us. I selected a few smart ones and added them to the messengers of the headquarters. Ning nodded. Soon, Jean Lannes arrived. So Ning, along with a group of officers, rode out of the monastery that served as the headquarters and headed straight for the place that Lazare Carnot had just circled on the map. After leaving the city, the group rode for more than an hour, and suddenly Ning shouted, Wait a minute. He was the first to pull the reins to slow down the horse. The others pulled in the reins and kept following Ning. Ning looked around. Now he was standing under a solitary beech tree. The tree was surprisingly large and looked to be more than 100 years old. From a distance, it looked like a huge mushroom growing on the ground. Standing under the tree, Ning looked in the direction he came from. Before we got here, were we always going uphill? Lazare cannot looked back and did not answer immediately. But Lance said, yes, we were always going uphill. And it looks like we are going downhill ahead. Ning clapped his hands vigorously. This place was a very small hill. Looking east and west, Ning could see that the ground had a fold at the foot of his feet, which would be overlooked if he did not look carefully. Ning turned his head to look to the other side. Next to the beach, there was a large barn and a lonely windmill. There was a windmill on the top of the hill, and it seemed that this place was suitable for utilizing wind power. Ning touched his chin. Napoleon spoke, it turns out that this is a mountain. If we set up cannons here, we can increase the range by 100 or 200 meters. Ning shook his head, no, that's not right. We shouldn't set up the cannons on the mountain. That's not right. We should set up our cannons on the back of the mountain, and put the infantry on the back slope. This reverse slope will block the firepower of the enemy's artillery. Then Ning pointed to the barn and windmill next to him. We use a determined force to guard the barn and let the enemy know that we are going to fight them here. Force the enemy to deploy on the north slope. When the enemy pushes over the ridge line, our line infantry and skirmishers will be waiting for them on the back slope. Of course there are also cannons. Lafayette's artillery only has heavy infantry guns, and they are very slow to maneuver after they are deployed. Our artillery can fully play to its advantages. Especially the light cavalry troops commanded by Napoleon. When Ning bought the artillery, he specifically bought a series of 6-pound cavalry guns. These guns have a small caliber and lighter projectiles, but they are light and can be pulled by horses for fast movement. Ning remembered that in the biography of Napoleon in Another Time and Space, Napoleon liked to command cavalry artillery the most, and find places to attack the enemy flexibly. Now it is just right for Napoleon to do his old job. Ning gestured excitedly, the enemy is here. After crossing the ridge, they will face our firepower. Think about it. Davout, the task of defending the mill and barn will be handed over to my 1st Brigade. Lannes, the training company is also willing to take on this important task. Ning, no, the training company has its own tasks, very important tasks. I will take you to see the terrain later. This barn and mill are the positions of the 1st Brigade. It is not known how long it will take Lafayette to come here. I estimate that it will take more than half a month. You can take the non-commissioned officers of your troops and let them familiarize themselves with the terrain nearby. Davout saluted, understood. Ning, the remaining 4 brigades will form a thin blue line on the back slope, which is the most suitable formation for exerting firepower. Once the enemy crosses the ridge, continue to shoot. The thin blue line, yes, what Ning played is actually the same as what the Duke of Wellington played at Waterloo. Set up the formation on the back slope, use the terrain to block the French artillery fire, and then a large number of troops will spread out into a thin red line on the back slope. When the French cavalry was deployed under the leadership of Ning, the red lines turned into squares. It can be said that the French army lost at Waterloo. In addition to the arrival of Prussian reinforcements, another major reason was that the French artillery did not play a role. If the French artillery had bombarded Wellington's infantry when they were all arranged in squares, the results would probably be different. This was not the first time Wellington used this trick. When he was in Spain, he used this tactic called thin red line to beat the French army. Of course, Wellington was forced to do this. The French artillery was too fierce. After all, Napoleon was an artilleryman, so the artillery in the French army was highly valued. Wellington experienced several French artillery attacks and then came up with this tactic. This tactic can give full play to the high morale and high discipline of the Red Army, while avoiding the French artillery's strengths. And now, Ning's artillery should be stronger than Lafayette's, but this does not prevent Ning from copying this tactic. After all, if the enemy's artillery cannot be used, then the artillery combat power ratio will change from the original 1 to 1.5 to 0 to 1.5, right? Chapter 132, Frost the Traitor. After that, Ning went to inspect 3 possible places for camping. In the next few days, Ning was actively preparing for a possible war. Although this is the case, the current situation may not necessarily develop into a war, and Ning may still slip away. After all, nominally, what Ning did was in line with the parliamentary decree. The redemption policy was set by the parliament, and the assignats were issued by the parliament. It can only be said that the parliament left a loophole and Ning took advantage of it. It is also possible that the parliament will issue a decree to plug the loophole, and then send a commissioner here to ask Ning to implement the new decree. In that case, it will take a long time to drag it out. It is already July, and Louis V will flee soon. And Ning may be able to step down from the focus. However, Ning did not dare to neglect the preparations for war, because he knew that the parliament wanted to fight at this time. In real history, in November 1791, the parliament took the initiative to launch a war against Prussia and Austria, with the aim of promoting revolution in neighboring countries. Yes, they want to turn Prussia and Austria into constitutional monarchies and promote revolution. So there is a reason why the French Revolution was suppressed. At the beginning, the French Revolution took the initiative to promote its own system. Especially after Louis V was beheaded, the monarchs of Europe were in danger and had to unite. As for why the parliament wanted to go to war at this time, there are several reasons. One is that the parliament feels that the current instability in the country is all caused by the old nobles in foreign countries. They don't know that there is a problem with their own land policy. The second is that war can also divert attention. The third is that war can make a fortune. In short, there are too many people in the parliament at this time who may support a war, and Ning has to be on guard. For this reason, Ning, who has always wanted to give up, actually runs around like a real social animal every day. While Ning was actively preparing for war, the parliament also discussed for several consecutive days how to deal with the Kantar region. The news I got is that Mr. Frost has assembled an army of old aristocrats. The speaker slammed the table hard. Isn't this enough to be used as evidence? He is colluding with those opposition groups abroad and plotting against the National Assembly. Against His Majesty the King. As soon as the voice fell, Marat stood up. I don't think he will do this. Remember, Frost is the hero of the Bastille. He has saved the revolution from danger many times. If there is only one person in Paris who is loyal to the revolution, it is only Mr. Frost. Marat's words caused a chorus of opposition, and someone stood up and shouted, Marat. Don't think we don't know that you are in the same group with him. Marat was also angry. What's the matter? Mr. Frost has always been concerned about the people and is a well-deserved friend of the people. Look, he used his own money to buy land and distribute it to the people. How could such a person betray the revolution? What is own money? He used assignats. Aren't the assignats issued by the parliament? The parliament also used assignats to pay the salaries of civil servants and the military. Since it can pay salaries, it can buy land. Marat refused to give in. This left many people speechless. But someone immediately slammed the table and said, Mr. Frost, he paid the troops' wages himself with real gold and silver. That means he doesn't support assignats, he's a traitor. Marat, that's because he is in the remote areas. As early as last year when he sent troops to quell the rebellion, he said he was hungry. The remote areas did not recognize assignats and could only use silver coins. Rather, the fact that he could use his own silver coins to pay the troops is proof that he is concerned about the revolution. But you, banker Mr. Grote, you have a lot of silver coins too. Use them to support the parliament. Use them to pay the National Guard. Grote hesitated for a few words and suddenly seemed to have found a life-saving straw. He slammed the table and shouted, since it is a remote area and since assignats are not recognized there, then assignats should not be used to buy land. The ones who don't recognize assignats are the farmers in the remote areas. Frost bought land from the patriots in the local parliament. Patriots should recognize the certificates of assignment. Marat also slammed the table to refute. Then several people slammed the table and stood up. You are quibbling. This is a double standard. Marat, nonsense. My logic is self-consistent. Then another large group of people stood up and refuted Marat. At this time, the rotating speaker Brissot stood up. Gentlemen, it is obviously meaningless to continue arguing. I propose that we start voting now and let everyone use their votes to express their opinions. Marat's expression changed when he heard this. Many of Ning's friends cannot run for election in this parliament because of Robespierre's proposal. Although there are still many people in the Jacobin Club in the parliament, many of these people are not very familiar with Frost. In addition, the Girondists have been advocating on various occasions that they should take practical actions now to teach domestic and foreign enemies a lesson. If they vote now, Andy may become a traitor identified by the parliament. But Marat was powerless to stop the vote. After all, the vote was in full compliance with the parliament's procedures. To stop the vote, there must be enough people opposing it, Marat simply couldn't get so many people together. So the voting process began. Marat could only watch Andy Frost being defined as a traitor by the Parliament. Lafayette was pacing back and forth in his office, anxiously waiting for the results of today's parliamentary discussion. Suddenly, Berthier opened the door and came in. The Parliament has passed a resolution. Andy Frost has been identified as the chief leader of the domestic counter-revolution, the mastermind behind the turmoil in the country, and the general backstage of the traitors. Lafayette slammed his fist on the table. Great! Has the Parliament decided when to attack him? The Parliament members are already outside the door. They come to invite you to the Parliament to ask for your opinion on suppressing the rebellion. Lafayette, then what are you waiting for? I'll go now. Tuileries Palace, study. Queen Marie is persuading Louis V. My dear, now these hateful rebels are busy fighting among themselves. It's the best time to flee to Austria. As long as we run to the border and join forces with General Bouillé's troops, the royalists scattered around will gather towards us. Prussia, Austria, Tsarist Russia, and even the Kingdom of Sardinia on the Italian peninsula will support us. We can kill these hateful parliamentarians in one fell swoop and take back everything that belongs to us. Look at the life we are living now. This Tuileries Palace is small and stuffy. I am an Austrian princess, and I married a king, not a commoner. Louis V was embarrassed. It's not a good time to escape now, right? Now, because the Parliament's policies are unpopular, my reputation outside Paris is rising. After a while, Queen Marie interrupted Louis V. What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear that some of the parliamentarians are privately talking about establishing a republic like the people in the New World? If they can kidnap you from Versailles or Paris, they can take away your crown. Because they have already looked down on the monarchy. I must leave Paris and join the righteous men who support the monarchy. His Majesty Leopold of Austria is my relative, he will not ignore me. Marie stepped forward and said anxiously. Louis V pursed his lips and hesitated. At this time, someone knocked on the door. Marie, come in. The door opened. It was the Queen's Swedish lover, Count Axel Fersen. After he came in, he bowed slightly to Louis V, and then reported, the Parliament has just made a decision to declare Andy Frost, the special envoy of Quinta, a traitor. Lafayette has rushed to the Parliament and may send troops soon. Louis V was delighted when he heard it. What? Really? Great. I have tolerated that bastard for a long time. Lafayette, go and crush him. Marie turned around, walked to Louis V in 3 steps, and took his hand. Your Majesty. When Lafayette sends troops, it is our best chance to escape. We can't miss it. Louis V pursed his lips and hesitated again. Queen Marie, Your Majesty. Louis V sighed. Okay. When Lafayette leaves Paris, we will leave. Chapter 133 Lafayette's Expedition. That morning, Ning received a letter from Paris. The letter was written by Marat, and in a tone of urgency, he said that the Parliament had already designated him as a traitor, and that Lafayette had been appointed by the Parliament and would set out to quell the rebellion soon. Ning threw down the letter and sighed. Sure enough, the Parliament at that time was very warlike. If it weren't for him, they would have declared war on Prussia, Austria and a number of low-lying countries in a few months. At this time, someone knocked on the door. Come in. Ning responded softly. The door opened, and Lazare Carnot, Davout and other officers rushed into the room, looking at Ning eagerly. Carnot, we heard that there was a letter from Paris. How is the situation? Just as we expected, prepare for battle. Ning tried to say this in a light tone. In fact, he was actually quite worried in his heart. After all, he was fighting a regular large-scale battle with a general with actual combat experience like Lafayette. Ning was not sure of victory. No, it should be said that he was very uncertain at the moment. After all, he only had more than 10,000 men, and the disadvantage in terms of manpower was too great. But he could not show it, and could only say it in a light tone. The officers looked at each other, and Lazare Carnot, as the chief of staff, said to everyone, you heard it, go back to your posts. So the officers who had just entered left the room one after another. When only Lazare Carnot was left, he said to Ning, I think we should send a cavalry unit to scout in the direction of Paris and monitor the movements of Lafayette's army. Ning nodded, and then rang the bell on the table. Immediately, a messenger opened the door and came in. Go and call Ms. Oliver from the cavalry. After the messenger left, Lazare Carnot shook his head. This is the disadvantage of having female soldiers in the army. Their officers don't act with our officers, and every time we give an order, we have to call someone separately. Ning, but have you ever thought that it is precisely because of the female soldiers that we now have 15,000 people, 5,000 female soldiers? If all male soldiers were recruited, there would not be so many people. Kano, I admit that using female soldiers has given us more sources of troops. You just don't want girls to go to the battlefield. If they perform well in this battle, I will change my mind. Kano said so. And Ning was about to make a few sharp comments when the leader of the female cavalry, Captain Oliver, opened the door and came in. Cavalry Officer Oliver is here. And Ning immediately organized a team of cavalry who are familiar with the road, not too many, ride the best horses to the direction of Paris, and monitor Lafayette's movements. You can stay in a hotel. Oliver saluted. Understood, I will send the troops immediately. Well, let's go. There's nothing else to do. And Ning waved her hand. Oliver saluted and turned to leave. And Ning turned his gaze to Lazare Carnot and couldn't help asking, do you think we can win this time? Don't ask such questions in front of the officers. Carnot frowned slightly. You should show confidence. I know. So, do you think we will win? It's hard to say. After all, the enemy has a huge advantage in manpower. Our training is better than that of ordinary National Guards, but compared with the army of the Old Kingdom, the advantage is not obvious. And we also have an advantage in artillery. We have more artillery and a large number of cavalry artillery. And Ning nodded and added in his heart, we also have the genius artillery officer Napoleon Bonaparte. At this moment, someone knocked on the door again. Come in. After Ning answered the door, it was the maid Fanny who came in. General, several gentlemen from the Quinta City Council want to see you. And Ning frowned slightly. What the hell, why are they coming here at this time? Let them in. Fanny bowed and was about to leave, and several gentlemen from the Quinta City Council pushed the door in with big bellies. We are in, General. And Ning, what can I do for you? We heard that there was a letter from Paris. The leader was the new speaker of the Quinta City Council. General, I wonder if you are now. The National Assembly in Paris thinks I am a traitor. And Ning answered directly. Several big-bellied guys immediately smiled happily, but immediately suppressed their expressions and tried to restrain themselves. That's really bad. Paris won't really send troops to suppress us, right? And Ning, I'm afraid they will. Oh my God. A congressman exclaimed, Paris has 100,000 National Guards. Not that many. According to our intelligence, there should be about 60,000, but it's impossible to send them all. Lazare Carnot explained calmly. The current speaker, there should be 40,000, right? What can we do? 40,000 people. We only have more than 10,000 people. And Ning, just say what you want to say. I'm just worried. Don't worry. And Ning stood up. I will defeat Lafayette on the plain of Quinta, and then go to Paris to explain the benefits to the gentlemen of Paris. This time Ning spoke very confidently, as if he really had 1,000,000 soldiers in his heart. The gentlemen of the parliament looked at each other. Their faces were very bad. Then, we can only wish His Excellency the General a victory. The speaker said this. In Paris, the news that Lafayette was going to send troops had already spread throughout the city. The night before the troops were to be dispatched, a large number of soldiers appeared in the bars of Assizes in Paris. Parisians gathered around these soldiers and asked curiously, "Are you really going to fight, Mr. Frost?" The soldier replied, "Yes, yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't give you money." Then the people around asked again, "We gave you money? Are they silver coins? How could that be?" The soldiers all answered, "We gave you notes. That's why we are in a hurry to spend the money before we set off." Everyone knows that outside of Paris, few people use notes, and everyone uses silver coins. Then another citizen would ask curiously, "Why are you giving out notes?" When General Frost was dispatching troops, he gave out silver coins. Then the person who said this would be warned by everyone, "Stop talking, General Frost is already a traitor." Such scenes were staged in bars throughout Paris. Soon, everyone in the city knew that Lafayette was stingy and learned from General Frost to give out money before going to war, but he didn't learn it thoroughly and was stingy in giving out notes. That night, people in Paris were discussing who would win the next war, Lafayette or Mr. Frost. No one knew that in the Tuileries Palace, the Queen was anxiously waiting for Lafayette to go to war. The next morning, to be exact, on the morning of August 5, 1791, 40,000 French troops led by Lafayette set out from Paris. Louis V also attended the ceremony of the troops' departure. At the ceremony, Lafayette swore to Louis V and the gentlemen of the Parliament that he would definitely capture the traitor Andy Frost. Chapter 134 The King Escapes. Early that morning, Ning was having breakfast at home when a letter from Paris arrived. The letter was written by Marat. Ning immediately opened the letter at the dining table and found that there was no specific details except the news that Lafayette had sent troops. Ning muttered, "It's better to have something useful. It turns out that we can't rely on laymen for these things. We have to look at professional intelligence personnel." As soon as the voice fell, Fanny entered the dining room and said, "The officers are here. Ning, let them come in. If they haven't eaten yet, let's eat together." Fanny bowed slightly and turned to leave. A moment later, the officers entered the dining room. Lazare Carnot was the first to speak. "According to the intelligence from Paris, the enemy has about 40,000 troops, about 3,000 cavalry, and more than 80 artillery pieces. They are heading towards Quinta. Ning, the total force is 40,000, which is about the same as we expected. Have you had breakfast? Sit down and eat together." Napoleon was not polite and sat down first. Seeing this, other officers also sat down. Fanny led the maids to serve the dishes. While eating, Davout said, "It will take the enemy about a week to march to Quinta. We can set out in 5 days and camp near the preset battlefield to wait for them." In this era, it seems that the two armies will first march to the vicinity of the battlefield and camp more than 10 kilometers apart before the decisive battle. This can also avoid the troops being too tired during the battle. Like Austerlitz, the two sides confronted each other for many days before the decisive battle. Ning, eat first. We have sent cavalry to scout early, and wait for them to get detailed intelligence. I don't want our troops to stay in the wilderness for too long, which will reduce morale. The conditions of sleeping in tents in the wilderness are certainly not as good as in military camps, especially the military camps on Ning's side are all former monasteries. The overall conditions are very good. The troops are used to the conditions of the monastery, and sleeping in the wild will reduce morale even more. Napoleon looked at Ning and said with a smile, "You are really patient, Andy. 40,000 troops are coming towards us. The number is more than twice ours. Ning, the last time I came out to Quinta to suppress the rebellion, the difference in troop strength was about the same. At that time, my troops were not well trained, and there were no outstanding officers like you, but I still won." Russell, the commander of the 2nd Brigade, frowned slightly. "I have been by your side since then." "Yes, you were. But at that time you were just a second lieutenant who was promoted temporarily, and you knew almost nothing about marching and fighting." Russell smiled awkwardly. "Now, I don't understand much either. Sometimes I am confused by what Davout said." And Ning smiled. After all, Russell was promoted from a private, and he could barely read. Lazare Carnot had told Ning that this private promoted person could at most be a regimental commander, and he could not be a higher level officer. But Ning deliberately wanted to create a role model promoted from a private, so he made him a brigade commander. As for the effect of this, Ning was not sure. At least those non-commissioned officers who were born as privates would be more motivated. While Ning's officers were having breakfast, Lafayette was also having breakfast with the officers in his tent. In Lafayette's army, all the middle and senior officers were old aristocrats. While eating, they talked about Andy and his team who were about to become opponents. The commander of the 1st Brigade, Count Ornat, said, "Have you heard about it? That Andy Frost, he specially asked someone to find an apprentice from a dyeing factory to be the captain of the teaching team. An apprentice from a dyeing factory. In battle, he might just pee in his pants and dye his pants." The officers laughed. Lafayette also laughed. But Berthier still had a serious face. Among his officers, Lazare Carnot and Louis Nicolas Davout are both very good talents and should not be underestimated. Count Ornat, among his officers, there is also a dwarf from Corsica. I heard that he is only 1 meter tall, a dwarf. When loading the cannon, he has to jump up to reach the muzzle. The noble officers laughed again. Lafayette said, "It's better not to do that. We should respect the enemy. After all, he has fought some very exaggerated battles. We should pay enough attention to him." Lafayette paused and continued, "It is precisely because I value him that I brought out 40,000 elite soldiers, most of whom are the original Royal Army. If he thinks that we are a group of rabble like Quinta's rebels before, then he will be in trouble. Count Ornate, no matter what, the battle force is 40,000 to 10,000, and the advantage is mine. An officer immediately retorted, no, no, they have 15,000 people. Count Ornate said contemptuously, huh? 5,000 women. What's the use of that? In my opinion, just sending out our cavalry unit can determine the victory in one fell swoop. Our cavalry can first break through those women cavalry, and then rush into the enemy's line. Most of Frost's army are men in long trousers, and they may not even be able to form a phalanx. The battle will be over in an instant. The officers at the table nodded one after another. The commander of the cavalry, Marcus Roland, said solemnly, I still hope they can resist for a while longer, otherwise our victory will become utterly unglorious. The officers laughed again. The whole tent was filled with a joyful atmosphere. At this moment, someone shouted, report. Lafayette raised his eyebrows, come in, what's the matter? A staff officer lifted the curtain and came in. News from Paris, His Majesty the King is missing. Lafayette was shocked. What? Missing? Yes, today the King's family can't be found in the entire Tuileries Palace. The servants of the Tuileries Palace said that His Majesty the King and his family went out last night. Lafayette slammed the table hard. Damn it. What happened? Count Ornate asked in confusion. His Majesty the King fled? Why? His reputation is rising now, especially in remote areas. The calls for His Majesty to come back are getting louder and louder. He shouldn't flee at this time. Berthier asked, do you want to turn back? Lafayette thought about it and shook his head. No, we won't go back. His Majesty the King's escape must be related to Frost. If we defeat Frost, His Majesty will give up his unrealistic ideas. Berthier asked worriedly, what if your Majesty flees to Austria? There are a large number of nobles who want to restore the old order abroad, and they will gather under the King's command. Lafayette shook his head. The first problem we have to worry about now is the traitor Frost. Defeat him and everything will be fine. He is the cause of all the problems. Chapter 135, Camp. On Ning's side, he received the news of the King's escape 2 days later, and the result of the King's escape was also received. Louis V had already reunited with General Bouillet at the border, which means that the King's escape was successful. History has completely derailed. And Ning originally thought that Lafayette's dispatch of troops would not affect the result of the King's escape. After all, the King's escape was his own death. He sat in a very luxurious supercarriage and got off the car and strolled around wherever he stopped. In the end, he was discovered by the conscious revolutionary masses and then bet on the border. It stands to reason that this has nothing to do with Lafayette and should not be affected. However, the current situation is that the King succeeded. Maybe the event of the King's escape itself has many random factors that affect his success rate? Obviously, the King has escaped, but Lafayette still drove towards Cantal with great momentum. Maybe Lafayette thought that the King just ran to General Bouillet, and General Bouillet was originally his friend, so it was not a big deal. On August 10, 1791, Ning received a report from cavalry reconnaissance that Lafayette's vanguard was less than 20 kilometers away from Quinta. So Ning also led his troops to the battle. He led his troops to camp near the previously selected battlefield for the decisive battle, and then waited for Lafayette's arrival next to the beech trees on the top of the mountain with a group of officers. I see. Davout was the first to discover the enemy and pointed to the front. Look, over there. Ning quickly raised his telescope and looked in the direction Davout pointed. Sure enough, a team of troops with tricolor flags appeared on the horizon. Laser Carnot, look at the location where this appeared. He really chose to camp in the place we explored before. And Ning, Berthier is a very methodical person. He will choose the most textbook approach. Then Ning turned to Jeanlands, who made an exception and mixed in with the officers, and said, the enemy is camping. It's up to you tonight. Since the enemy sent out troops, the training team has been eating vegetables rich in vitamins, just for today's battle. Lands asked in confusion, what are vitamins? And Ning realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. But he directly evaded it. It doesn't matter. You will definitely not have night blindness tonight. I am waiting for the news of your successful sneak attack. Landes saluted, leave it to me, I guarantee to complete the task. Davout, the enemy cavalry is coming towards us. In fact, after Ning and his men arrived at this position, they saw the enemy cavalry more than once. However, these reconnaissance hussars did not attack Ning and his party who were ready for battle. They just looked at them from a distance and left. After all, and Ning had a brigade of soldiers occupying the barn, the mill and the surrounding low stone walls, which was quite tricky for a small group of cavalry. However, this time, there was about a brigade of cavalry coming this way, and it looked like a large and mighty force. And Ning turned his head and ordered the artillery next to him, "Target the enemy cavalry, fire." So the artillery assigned to the 1st Brigade opened fire. 6 12-pound infantry guns spewed out flames and smoke. "Napoleon, this distance is too far. Unless you are lucky, you can't hit it at all." And Ning also saw the shells fall far in front of the enemy cavalry, bouncing in the wheat field like skipping stones. However, the artillery bombardment cannot be said to be ineffective. The horses in the front row of the cavalry were obviously frightened, and many of them shook their heads anxiously. The cavalry's forward momentum also stopped. Soon, the cavalry that had been running towards this side slowed down and finally turned their horses' heads. "Davout, seeing that we have cannons, they won't move forward. The leader of this cavalry is very cautious. Napoleon, there are cannons, and they are 12-pound cannons, which means that the baggage has been brought up, and it is not a small force that rushed to garrison. The enemy's reconnaissance purpose has been achieved, so it is normal to return home." At this time, Ms. Oliver of the cavalry and several cavalry officers rode up the hill together. "Our reconnaissance troops are back, and we are facing Lafayette's main force," Oliver reported. "Look at the flags, there are 10 regiments in front of us, and Lafayette's main force is behind." And Ning, "Got it. It seems that all the enemies will camp in front of us. Lands, your troops will set off after dinner." Landis saluted and turned to leave. And Ning, "Okay, artillery cease fire. The smoke is almost blocking our sight." "Napoleon, cease fire quickly." At this time, the air was already full of the smell of gunpowder, and the white smoke drifted forward with the wind. "Davout, we are marching at night, and there is no drumbeat. It's good enough if we can reach the enemy camp. And Ning, you have to trust them. Of course, we didn't bet our hope of victory on a sneak attack. Even if the sneak attack fails, we will defeat the enemy on this hill tomorrow." After saying that, and Ning turned around and asked Lazare Cano, "What is the name of this mountain?" "Cano, it's called Mill Mountain." And Ning, "Mill Mountain? Is it that simple and straightforward?" "Yes, I asked my fellow villagers, and there is also a name called Old Tree Mountain. But most people call it Mill Mountain." And Ning curled his lips. The victory of Mill Mountain sounds like a victory of the same level as the Little Coal Hill victory. This is too unimpressive. And Ning, from today on, this mountain will be called Ningen Mountain. And Ning's translation plugin translated Ningen Mountain into Latin, which immediately became much more handsome. Lazare Cano, "Okay, I'll make a note on the map." Lafayette had just entered his camp at this time. Marcus Roland rode over on horseback and saluted Lafayette. "General, we found a flag that looks like Frost's, on the hill ahead." Lafayette immediately turned his head to look at the hillside ahead. Because the distance was too far, he could only barely see the smoke from the cannons firing on the hillside. He took out the telescope, stretched it to the longest, and aimed it at the hillside. "There's indeed a flag. So this place is the battlefield chosen by Frost? Humph, I have to admire his courage. He dared to come out to fight in the wilderness with such a huge disadvantage in force." Lafayette said disdainfully, "Back then in the New World, Cornwallis's disadvantage was not as big as this, but he had already chosen to defend the city. This arrogant guy, tomorrow, he will pay the price for his arrogance." Marcus Roland, "My cavalry tried to charge, but the enemy immediately opened fire. It seems that they are going to defend the mill on the top of the mountain." Lafayette, "Let him defend it. In the face of such a force advantage, a small amount of terrain advantage cannot affect the progress of the war. Order the troops to have an extra meal tonight." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136 Night Attack. At night, the sentry was yawning at the guard post outside the camp of the 1st Lafayette Brigade. "Wake up!" The sergeant who was checking the sentry shouted angrily, "Keep your eyes open, the enemy is in front of you." The sentry stood at attention and couldn't help yawning again. The sergeant hit the sentry's head. "Damn it! I'm going to wake you up." "No. Don't do it. Sergeant, I know I was wrong." The sentry immediately begged for mercy. It's dark at night, no one will come to attack us. If I were the enemy, I would have been scared and ran away overnight. The sergeant curled his lips. What you said is indeed true. We have a great advantage. Tomorrow's battle should end with our victory. But because of this, we have to cheer up and prevent the enemy from having any crooked ideas. The sentry shouted loudly, "Yes." The sergeant nodded and started to check the next sentry post. As soon as he left, the sentry yawned, then leaned back against a tree, his eyes blurred. At this moment, a flash of a knife suddenly appeared in the darkness, and before the sentry could make a sound, his throat was cut by a dagger. The face of Jeanlands, who led the sneak attack, emerged from the darkness. He gently put down the body of the sentry, and then whistled at the darkness behind him. Then the soldiers of the sneak attack team filed out of the darkness. A sergeant reported to Lands, "Many people have fallen behind, and there are only so many of us." "Don't worry," Lands waved his hand, "the enemy's camp is just ahead. Torches are ready, use them on the spot, and we will go." After speaking, Jeanlands rushed to the enemy camp. Everyone followed closely. Lafayette had just finished dinner with the service of the orderly, and was about to write a battlefield diary by the candlelight in the tent, when suddenly a shout came from outside, "Fire!" Lafayette just raised his head and there was a loud noise outside. Lafayette stood up immediately and shouted, "Someone come." Immediately the orderly lifted the curtain and came in. "General. What's going on?" "I don't know, there is a fire in the distance, and there are sounds of explosions." As soon as he finished speaking, Chief of Staff Berthier rushed into the tent. "Oh no, General, I think this is a night attack by the enemy." Lafayette frowned. "Night attack? Stabilize the troops immediately. Only small troops can attack at night. We can't let chaos spread in the troops." As soon as he finished speaking, there was another explosion outside. "Berthier, maybe the gunpowder of the artillery exploded." At this time, someone else broke into the tent. It was the battalion commanders of several battalions stationed around the tent of Commander Lafayette. "General, Frost is coming. We will." "Asshole. Stop panicking," Lafayette said angrily. "I don't believe Frost's army can march at night, and march at night without torches. This is impossible. The enemy must be a small force, maybe only hundreds of people. Stay calm." At this time, Lafayette heard someone outside shouting, "Lafayette was killed. My army was defeated. Run." Lafayette was furious. "Catch the person who shouted this, he is disturbing the morale of the army. Catch him and kill him." As he said that, he rushed out of the tent angrily and shouted, "I am Lafayette. I'm here. Everyone calm down." At the same time, at Davu's base, Ning was still standing under the beech tree on the top of the mountain, observing the night with a telescope. Davu stood beside him. "General, there will be another big battle tomorrow, you should go back and rest. Even if the night attack team fails, we can still defeat Lafayette tomorrow." Ning was about to reply when suddenly there was a fire in the distance. At first it was just a little fire, but soon it became a hole. "Ning, look! Fire!" Lana and his men succeeded. Davu also looked at the fire. "It looks like they burned several camps, which shouldn't be a lot." "Ning, you don't understand, even if there were only a few casualties, their attack could make the enemy camp a mess, which would be of great benefit to tomorrow's battle." Davu: "Yes, that's for sure. Now the fire has started, General, you should go back to the central camp and rest." Ning shook his head. "No, I want to stay here and take a look at the flames. You said it would be great if we took this opportunity to attack." Davu frowned. "This is unrealistic. Let alone attacking at night, even ordinary marching is difficult to maintain, even with torches." Ning could only sigh. Davu said so it must be true. The organization of the troops in this era, as well as the subjective initiative of the soldiers, could not support organized night operations. So Ning often felt that the comparison between modern armies and ancient armies, which was very popular on the internet before the time travel, was very meaningless. "Ning, I hope Lana can return safely." "Davu, do you need me to send some troops forward to meet them?" No, it's dark, and I don't want to take on another group of well-trained troops. You will be needed to guard this important place tomorrow." Ning yawned and said, "I'm a little sleepy too, let's go back." "Davu, good night, General." Lana had just lit a baggage cart carrying gunpowder at this time, and the violent explosion almost threw him out. He was unconscious for a while before he opened his eyes and climbed up. Looking around, The non-commissioned officers were organizing the firefighting, and the comrades who came with Lana to attack were nowhere to be seen. Rana raised his eyebrows and muttered, "My mission is almost over." He quietly moved his hands and feet and crawled on the ground. Fortunately, the situation was in chaos at this time and no one noticed him. Even a team of firefighting soldiers ran past Rana without even looking at him crawling on the ground. He struggled to crawl into the bushes next to the camp. After hiding in the bushes, Rana observed the situation again and decided to hide here tonight and sleep until General Frost defeated the enemy tomorrow. Yes, Rana had no doubt that Mr. Frost could win, because when they set out, Mr. Frost looked so confident. At that time, Mr. Frost said, "Rana, don't be too stressed. Even if your sneak attack fails, we can still defeat Lafayette tomorrow. Just do your best and try to keep yourself alive." Rana hid himself between the roots of the bushes and fell asleep carelessly with the sound of the enemy running and shouting. The next morning, when the first rays of dawn appeared from the east, Lafayette looked at his men in a mess. "Damn it!" he cursed. At this time, Berthier ran over from a distance and saluted Lafayette. "General, I counted the losses last night. There are about 500 injured and more than 200 dead, but we lost a lot of baggage. In addition, the troops of the 1st Division fought fires all night and are very tired." Lafayette cursed again. "Damn it! Send out cavalry, I want news about the enemy's formation." "Berthier, I sent out reconnaissance at dawn, and the first wave of cavalry has returned. The enemy has set up a formation on the nameless hill in front of us, occupying the mill and barn that are easy to defend, as well as the low stone wall next to it." Lafayette stood up. "Very good, it seems that Frost is going to fight us here. The 1st Division will serve as the general reserve and recover its physical strength on the spot first. The 2nd and 3rd Divisions, a total of 20,000 troops, will immediately line up." Chapter 137, Opening Champagne at Halftime? "No, we have to open it before the game even starts." And Ning didn't sleep well tonight. He always dreamed that Rana died in the night raid, and then came to him with his head held high, asking over and over again, "Did I help?" So Ning got up before dawn. Last night, when he went to bed, he only took off his coat, so his shirt and other things were wrinkled. And Ning didn't care about so much, so he picked up his coat and put it on, lifted the curtain and went out. The first ray of dawn had appeared in the east, and the soldiers in the camp were sitting around the campfire, holding cups and drinking coffee or tea. Seeing Ning coming out, they all stood up. "General!" And Ning almost hallucinated that they were shouting loyalty. "And Ning, you continue to drink tea, it's not time to assemble yet." "It's coffee, sir," a chubby sergeant said. Conte is close to the southern trading port, where coffee from the colony can be obtained. Of course, there is also tea, but the French seem to be competing with the British. The British like to drink tea, but the French don't like tea and want coffee. The fat sergeant, "Would you like some coffee, sir?" And Ning waved his hand and called out, "Where's the groom?" "Here." A smart-looking boy immediately came out. "I was just brushing your horse. Do you want me to move it over?" And Ning nodded. "Coming soon." After saying this, the boy immediately ran away. While waiting for the horse to be moved, Laser Cano and a group of officers came over. "And Ning, is Lance back?" "Not yet, sir." Cano replied, "I have reminded the cavalry that went out this morning to look for Lance and his men, but there is no news yet." And Ning, "Okay, let's go to the top of the mountain to see what's going on." Just at this time, the boy led the horse over. "Your horse, sir." And Ning took the reins, jumped on the horse, and ran towards the top of the mountain. On the top of the mountain, Davout's troops had all gotten up, and the soldiers were checking their weapons. As soon as they saw Ning coming, the soldiers shouted together, "General!" And Ning's reputation was not high enough at the moment, so they did not shout "Long live the general!" And Ning waved to everyone, then came to Davout. "How is the situation?" "The chaos last night must have made the enemy's central army very tired." Davout put away the telescope, but the enemy's camps on both wings were not affected too much. More than half of the enemy should be full of energy. And Ning, "Not bad, it can consume the energy of ordinary enemies, which is better than I expected. The remaining question is whether Lance can come back." "Davout, you seem to value Jean Lance very much?" "I don't understand, he is just an apprentice in a dyeing factory, and he didn't learn military affairs before joining the army." And Ning, "I feel that he has the potential to become an excellent officer. He will become a rare talent." Davout raised his eyebrows and did not reply. At this time, the faint sound of military music floated from the north. At this time, Ning's officers also rode up the hillside, so everyone took binoculars to look at the enemy camp at the bottom of the hill. The enemy's troops walked out of the tents and lined up at the edge of the hedge at the bottom of the hill. Davu, look at the flags, the 2nd and 3rd divisions are in the front. Ning, well, just looking at this formation, the troops are well trained. Davu, can you withstand it? Davu smiled, don't worry, we built fortifications overnight. And the enemy can't rush up together to attack us. Only the few battalions closest to us will attack us. The rest of the enemy will be left to the brother troops to deal with. We will be firmly nailed here, waiting for you, General, to defeat the enemy's 2 wings. Napoleon, my cavalry artillery can fire on the top of the hill first to help you kill the enemy, and then retreat after the enemy comes up. Ning, all the cavalry artillery is under your command, now you can let them move. Napoleon immediately saluted Ning. I understand, you watch. After saying that, he turned the horse's head and whipped its butt hard with a whip, making the horse spread its hooves and run. Ning, order each brigade not to rest, but to line up in the designated positions. Laser Cano immediately gave specific instructions to the messenger, and soon 9 messengers rode their horses and galloped towards the camp in the rear. Ning continued to stay on the top of the hill, observing the enemy's actions with a telescope. The enemy's artillery appeared, pushing cannons. Lafayette's artillery were all bulky infantry guns, and there were quite a lot of them. A large row of artillery looked scary. Exposed to so many artillery, even if the morale could withstand it, the casualties would be great. Ning instantly understood that he had made the right choice to choose the reverse slope position. After all, the accuracy of artillery in this era was very poor, and it was impossible to really use artillery to perform anti-artillery tasks. Generally, the artillery of both sides aimed at the line infantry columns that were easier to hit and killed each other. Ning touched Davu's shoulder. The enemy has a lot of artillery, can you handle it? Davu smiled, we have bunkers, it shouldn't be a problem. Ning patted Davu's shoulder vigorously. At this time, Ning heard the sound of drums coming from behind him. This drumbeat was much stronger than the one coming from the foot of the mountain in front. He turned around and saw the infantry of the other 4 brigades walking out of the camp to the beat of the military musicians and lining up in front of the camp. A thin blue line gradually took shape on the reverse slope. Napoleon drove up with his horse artillery and unloaded the artillery on the ridge. Ning shouted to Napoleon, bombard them hard. And then withdraw in time. Napoleon saluted on horseback. Ning turned to Davu, I really want to defend this beech tree with you, but Carnot disagrees. Lazare Carnot immediately said, of course I disagree. I have never heard of the commander-in-chief running to the front line in person. Ning spread his hands, so I will watch from behind, just under that tree over there. Ning pointed to another beech tree in the distance. Davu, under the other beech tree, I know. If reinforcements are needed, I will send the messenger to gallop towards the tree. Ning, good luck to you, Davu. I wish you health and victory, sir. After Davu saluted, Ning turned his horse around and galloped towards the tree he had chosen, with the officers following behind him. On the ridge not far away, Napoleon raised his right hand and waved it vigorously, fire. The cavalry artillery that had just been deployed opened fire. Immediately afterwards, the team of infantry artillery assigned to Davu also roared in the artillery position. The rumbling of the artillery made Ning's heart excited. It has begun, he thought, 15,000 against 40,000. When I first crossed over, I never thought that I would command such a large battle. If I can't win, I'm afraid I will have to go to the guillotine. When Ning thought of this, his breathing became rapid. He really had no confidence. Although it was a night attack and a good position was chosen, the other party had such a huge advantage in manpower after all. That confident look was all for his subordinates to see. After all, the commander must appear confident and sure of victory at all times, otherwise the soldiers will be shaken. Damn it, I just wanted to be a fence-sitter, how could it become like this? It's meaningless to think about these things now. Davu, Napoleon, you must give me strength. Now the most reliable cards in Ning's hand are the talents of these famous generals. With such complicated thoughts, Ning came to the beech tree he had chosen as his headquarters. Then he found that the little maid Fanny appeared in a carriage. Ning, what are you doing here? Fanny, I think you may need these to kill time. As she said that, she braked the carriage, jumped out, and then took out tables, chairs, parasols, champagne and fruits from the carriage. and Ning's mouth opened into an O shape. Fanny, why, you don't want it? Then I'm leaving. No, 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 you stay. I want some champagne. And Ning turned over and got off the horse, came to the table, sat down, and took the champagne handed over by Fanny. After taking a big sip of champagne, and Ning felt that his breathing was much smoother. Sure enough, alcohol can give courage. At the same time, in the queue of the 3rd Infantry Brigade not far from Ning, many people saw Ning drinking champagne. So the experienced veterans spoke up one after another. See, General Frost feels that we have a sure win. He even opened the champagne. For a moment, the morale of the soldiers was greatly boosted. Chapter 138 The First Cry of Famous Generals. After Ning retreated to the rear, Davu rode his horse back and forth in his garrison area to encourage everyone. We have strong fortifications, which we built overnight yesterday. We will cause huge casualties to the enemy and let them always remember the flag of our 1st Brigade. Someone joked, there is nothing special about the flag of our brigade. Yes, except for a Roman letter, there are almost only some patterns left. Davu, if you fight well in this battle, a beech tree will be added to the flag to record your merits this time. That's nothing to be happy about. It's just a beech tree. A sergeant joked, if you ask me, just make a beer cup, so that everyone will have beer to drink in the future. The soldiers laughed. Davu, anything is fine, as long as we withstand the attack and win this battle. We will vote on what to put on the flag, and then I will go and tell the general in person. As soon as he finished speaking, the enemy artillery opened fire to fight back. The first shell whistled in front of the low stone wall held by the 1st Brigade, and the shell jumped up and then passed over the top of the mountain. Davu, they raised the muzzle too high. It is obvious that the enemy artillery officers are inexperienced and did not take the terrain into consideration. As soon as he finished speaking, a solid shell hit the windmill on the top of the mountain. The projectile directly passed through the main body of the windmill's wooden structure and came out from the other side. A large amount of wood chips fell down. Davu, hold on. It's just a little wood chips. If you are really scared, just lower your head and bury it in the soil. The enemy artillery continued to fire, and countless shells fell around Davu's troops. The infantry guns assigned to Davu also roared in the artillery fort in response to the enemy. Compared with the 1st Brigade, which had a low stone wall as a barrier and lowered its body, the enemy's advancing troops suffered significantly more casualties. On Davu's flank, Napoleon was directing the cavalry artillery to fire fiercely. Fire. Use up as many shells as possible, so that we can retreat faster later. Napoleon also rode on a horse and ran along the deployment line of the artillery team, shouting loudly as he ran. Napoleon's troops did not have a pre-built artillery fort. In a round of volleys fired by the enemy artillery, a shell flew past a wheel of a cannon and broke the crossbeam of the cannon. The cannon immediately fell apart, and the horses pulling the cannon were frightened and ran wildly to the rear with a scream. The stirrup hooked a man's trouser leg. The man was dragged out by the horse, screaming all the way until his head hit a rock. Napoleon, hold on. It's just bad luck. The enemy's artillery commander is a layman. He actually let the cannons bombard us, a much smaller target. This is a waste of firepower. Keep shooting. At this time, a cannon fired a projectile that passed through the enemy's line in the form of a low-altitude scoop and directly penetrated several rows of lines. The battalion that was penetrated immediately shrank back, and its steps were obviously disordered. Many people were hesitating. Napoleon was very happy. Very good. Concentrate firepower and shoot that battalion. Aim at it. At this time, an artillery sergeant came to Napoleon. Captain, is the enemy too close to us? Retreat. Napoleon, don't retreat. The advantage of lining up on the top of the hill is that if we retreat a little bit, we will be blocked by the ridge line, so there is no need to retreat so quickly. Fire, keep firing. Adjust the gun barrel to a flat shooting angle. Keep firing. Each gun fires 2 more rounds and then reloads the cannonball. By then, the enemy will be close enough. Let's give them a taste of our strength. Davu used a telescope to observe the enemy's attacking formation. At this time, his deputy reported, Captain Bonaparte's artillery has not withdrawn yet. If this continues, they will be within the range of the enemy's rifles. Davu immediately turned the telescope and observed the cavalry artillery on the ridgeline. The cavalry artillery was still firing at the approaching enemy. The barrel was almost flat. The shells flew hundreds of meters after leaving the barrel and hit the ground, bouncing on the ground like a pinball. Passing through the enemy's line was a bloody storm. Davout, this Bonaparte is really brave. But artillery is a precious technical force and should not be consumed in the exchange of fire with the enemy's soldiers. Adjutant, should we send a messenger to ask him to retreat? No, we don't have the authority to command Bonaparte. So let's do our job. When the battle is over, I will give my opinion to the general. At this moment, Bonaparte's artillery began a new round of concentrated shooting, this time firing shotgun shells, and the storm of shrapnel directly hit the enemy's face. From Davout's perspective, he could see that the first 2 rows of enemy soldiers fell to the ground in large numbers without a telescope. The battalion that was bombarded by shotgun shells collapsed directly, but the remaining battalions that were relatively well preserved approached Bonaparte's artillery. Then Davout watched Bonaparte command the artillery to run away. The artillerymen dragged the horse guns and ran back, hanging together with the carriages that had been parked behind the ridgeline and waiting for orders, and jumped in the carriages and started to run. Davout laughed out loud. Great. So that's how it is. He is using the ridgeline as a cover. Even if the enemy stops firing right now, they won't be able to hit anything. Davout was laughing when he suddenly heard the enemy's command from the front, stand still. Everyone raise your guns. Davout turned his head to look at the enemy in front of him. A sergeant next to him shouted, Brigade Commander. Get off your horse and hide with us. The command came from the enemy, fire. The crackling sound of gunfire rang out, and the enemy's line was suddenly covered by white smoke. Davout faced the rain of lead bullets. Artillery, load shotgun shells. Quick. He was fearless and shouted loudly, exuding the confidence that all the lead bullets would bypass him. After the enemy's volley, the white smoke obscured the view and the enemy could not be seen at all. But from the drumbeats of the military band, it can be judged that the enemy is loading on the spot. Davout, it's our turn. Everyone, fire in volleys. The non-commissioned officers repeated Davout's orders, fire. Fire. The white smoke instantly engulfed the low wall next to the mill. Davout continued to order, free fire. Hit as many as you can. Fire. In this era, the troops fired volleys not to improve the hit rate, but to cause enough effective hits in an instant. To put it bluntly, it was to hit the enemy's morale. A bunch of people falling down at once and falling down one after another would have a different impact on morale. But Davout was now on the defensive, and it was unlikely that he would cause the enemy's attacking troops to collapse in morale by killing a large number of people in an instant. So he needed to project firepower as quickly as possible, so he adopted the strategy of free fire, so that everyone would fire immediately after reloading, and could form a continuous and dense firepower. The infantry gun assigned to Davout fired shotgun shells at a piece of white smoke, and the screams of the enemy could be heard in the thick smoke. Amid the screams, Davout heard the enemy's military music change to the sound of drums for a charge. Then the sound of shouting and killing began to rise in an uneven manner. Davout drew his sword and said, "The enemy is charging. It's time to test us." Chapter 139 Melee. Laser Carnot held up a telescope and observed while saying, "Davout seems to have engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the enemy." And Ning put down his champagne, stood up, took the telescope from Fanny, and looked at the mill on the top of the hill. The flag of Davout's 1st Brigade fluttered in the smoke, looking like a single man standing guard. At this moment, the enemy's large group crossed the ridgeline. And Ning put down the telescope and ordered the artillery position not far from him, fire. And Ning arranged the heavy and inconvenient infantry artillery in front of the battlefield and commanded it personally. After the order fell, dozens of 12-pound infantry artillery began to roar. Because the distance was very close, the accuracy of the shells was amazing. Some of the high-flying shells flew almost over the enemy's head, flew over the hill and landed, hitting the following battalion behind. The shells flying close to the ground all became rolling ball killers. In just a moment, hundreds of people had their legs broken and fell to the ground, wailing like pigs being slaughtered. At this time, the sound of artillery was heard again on the other side of the battlefield. And Ning turned the telescope and saw that the cavalry artillery unit led by Napoleon occupied a side position and opened fire almost at the enemy's cheek. Although Napoleon's troops were all 6-pound or even 4-pound cavalry cannons, the effect of shotgun shells on the face was outstanding at this distance. The key is that he also occupied a side position, and the killing effect was even more exaggerated. "Well done." And Ning shouted, "Napoleon did a good job." Laser Carnot was very worried. His position is prone to cavalry raids. And Ning, don't worry, trust our girls. And Ning's cavalry has been sent out, and they have only one order, to delay the enemy cavalry. No news has been received from the cavalry yet. Either they have not encountered the enemy cavalry, or they are in the battle. And Ning, it's our turn now. Bugler, blow the bugle. Kano, blow the volley. Yes, the volley. And Ning was a little anxious. Blow it quickly. Kano gave the order, and the bugler who had been following and Ning blew the trumpet together. The melody of the trumpet means each team starts shooting. The second brigade, which was closest to Ning, was the first to execute the order. Second row, stand up. The team that was squatting on the ground began to stand up, forming a formation of 1 row squatting and 2 rows standing up. Raise your guns and aim. The forest of bayonets fell down in unison. Fire. With the fire command passed down in sequence, the sound of volleys like firecrackers rang out, and the fire and smoke filled the entire field of vision. At the same time, on the plain on the flank of the battlefield, and Ning's cavalry commander Oliver was leading 2,500 cavalrymen to line up at the edge of the bushes. The plain near the battlefield that is most suitable for cavalry to charge is here. Other places are either too many small hedges blocking the view or too many stone walls and wooden fences. So Oliver led the cavalry here early. Christina and her deputy Clarice passed through the cavalry troops on standby and found Oliver. Ms. Oliver, is it okay for us to wait here? What if the enemy cavalry attacks from somewhere else? Oliver shook her head. Didn't you hear what the general said? The enemy's chief of staff, Berthier, is a law-abiding man. If he was responsible for arranging the entire battle plan, he would arrange the cavalry here because this is the most suitable place for cavalry to charge. As soon as the voice fell, the flag of the cuirassier regiment appeared in front. Oliver, look, our guests are here. Christina also turned her head and looked into the distance. Look at the flag. It looks like the cuirassier regiment. Are you sure you want us to charge the cuirassier regiment? Oliver, the order we received is to delay the enemy cavalry, not to defeat them. Sisters. Men always think we are not as good as them. Today, let them see how powerful we are. The female knights shouted in unison. Ms. Oliver looked at Christina and said, shouldn't you return to your command position? Christina saluted Oliver, turned her horse's head and galloped back along the way she came, followed closely by her deputy Clarice. Oliver watched Christina return to her troops, then stood up on her horse and drew her long sword. Sisters. Swords out. Let's go. Behind Oliver, the trumpeter blew the melody of the charge. The female knights in their 40s galloped on their horses, their beautiful hair flying in the morning sun. The cavalry galloped with great momentum, sweeping across the entire plain. Marcus Roland looked at the female knights charging towards him and snorted contemptuously. Humph, these women actually launched a charge at us. Blow the horn, and the whole army will charge. His deputy interrupted him. Wait a minute, the order we received is to bypass the enemy's flank and rear, and we should not waste our troops here. Just a bunch of women. Marcus Roland said angrily, we can soon cut them all off their horses. Blow the horn, and the whole army will charge. The trumpeter looked at his deputy, raised the trumpet again, and blew a melody to encourage the troops. Marcus Roland drew his saber and took the lead. The cuirassiers behind him swept across the fields like a silver hurricane. The two troops marched towards each other and collided in the center of the plain. The first batch of casualties appeared at the moment of encounter. The knight who was cut down fell off his horse, his feet still stuck in the stirrup, and was dragged all the way by the already running warhorse. The sound of weapons hitting and people's roars rang out. On Ning's side, the smoke from the volley of gunfire almost obscured the entire battlefield. And Ning couldn't see the enemy, and he was a little anxious. Logically speaking, the enemy should have been defeated after such heavy casualties. But he couldn't see it, and could only vaguely hear the sound of Davu's brigade fighting. The troops near Ning were loading ammunition in coordination with the drumbeats. When the troops were training to load ammunition, they followed a song with a certain number of steps. Each step had a fixed beat, and a step should be completed after a certain number of drumbeats. Therefore, the well-trained troops followed a unified pace in the rhythm of loading ammunition. Even if they fired freely, the subsequent shooting would be close to volley. With the drumbeats, most soldiers finished loading ammunition at about the same time and fired one after another. Compared with the first volley, this shooting was much looser and sounded like continuous firecrackers. And Ning looked ahead at the smoke and thought that he could fire without seeing the enemy at all. which was also a feature of the era of line shooting. After all, a smoothbore gun hit is a matter of luck. As long as you are facing the enemy's direction, you have a chance to win. It's really a random shooting. Ning, we have fired 2 volleys, but the enemy has not fought back. Could it be that they have already retreated? Laser Cano, we can't hear the military music anymore, maybe they have retreated. I suggest a ceasefire and see what happens. As soon as he finished speaking, Ning heard cheers coming from Davu's side. Ning directly pulled the reins and jumped on his horse. Cano, General. You shouldn't leave the command post. Only in this way can the messenger find you. Ning, it's all smoke and I can't see anything. As the commander-in-chief, I have to grasp the situation on the battlefield. I will be back soon. You wait here and deal with the news from the messenger. After speaking, Ning spurred his horse and galloped forward. Chapter 140. I have General Davu. Davu held a saber in one hand and a flintlock in the other, hacking and killing the enemy like a god of war. He used the flintlock as a spear for defense and the saber in his right hand for offense, and had already hacked down 7 or 8 enemies in a row. The blood of the enemies dyed half of Davu's vision red, and half of his bald head turned red. Every time he hacked down an enemy, he would shout, "Hold on! Victory will belong to us." When he hacked down the 8th enemy, a soldier shouted, "The enemy is retreating." Davu turned his head and saw that the retreating enemy troops were crossing the ridgeline and fleeing to the rear in the field next to his defense zone. "The enemy is retreating." Davu shouted, "We have won." The enemy troops who were still fighting with Davu's troops realized that the other troops had retreated after Davu's shout, so they turned around and retreated. In the blink of an eye, all the enemies near the low wall ran away. Davu's troops fired the last round of bullets at them and began to cheer loudly. Davu also cheered, and after shouting a few times, he suddenly sighed. The soldier next to him immediately asked curiously, "Captain, what's wrong with you?" "Davu, it's a pity that there are no cavalry, otherwise we can chase the enemy. If the enemy continues to flee like this, they will be regrouped again at the foot of the mountain." The soldier asked in confusion, "Have we not won yet?" "Davu, of course not, it's still early. The enemy has only invested half of its strength, and the next wave of attack will be more fierce." Davu suddenly raised his voice, "Okay. Stop cheering. Count the number of people in each battalion. The officers who died in the battle will replace the commanders according to their ranks. You guys, repair the sections of the low wall that were damaged by the bombardment." Although the low wall was only as high as a person's thigh, it was also a very important defensive facility. Davu turned his head and looked at the several cannons assigned to him, and shouted, "Where are the artillerymen? Are there any surviving artillerymen?" No one responded. It seems that in the melee just now, the artillerymen have all fought with the surging enemies. Davu randomly pointed at a few people and said, "Come with me, I will teach you how to use the cannon. You don't need to calculate any complicated shooting angles, just shoot straight and use shotgun shells." And Ning rode on his horse and galloped into the white smoke formed by the shooting. Not long after running, he saw people falling to the ground after being shot. There were quite a lot of people falling to the ground. It seemed that the artillery volleys had caused considerable casualties to the enemy. After walking a few more steps, he saw an enemy soldier with a broken leg, limping with a rifle. And Ning drew out his saber and wanted to chop this guy down, but the other party turned around and looked at Ning with a lifeless look, so he didn't swing the longsword in his hand. This guy no longer had the desire to fight. And Ning put down the knife and shouted loudly, "Lie down where you are. Surrender to army." The enemy did as he was told without resistance, lying on the ground with his hands on his head. And Ning ran past the surrendered soldier. Soon the mill appeared from the smoke. The mill had been half collapsed by artillery fire, the windmill blades had fallen off, and only half of the roof of the barn next to it remained. But the flag of Davu's 1st Brigade was still flying here. Someone saw Ning and shouted, "General! It's the general who is here." The soldiers immediately turned their heads to look behind them and cheered in unison, "General, may you always be healthy and victorious." And Ning waved his hand, and then saw Davu coming forward, so he pulled the reins and stopped his horse. Davu came over and grabbed Ning's horse, saying excitedly, "General! We have repelled the first wave of the enemy." When Ning saw Davu's appearance, he knew that he had experienced a bloody battle, and felt that Davu was indeed a fierce general. It was a pity that another fierce general, Lance, went on a night attack last night and has not returned yet. If this one was killed, Even if they won today, Ning would not be able to sleep well tonight. But now is not the time to think about such things. Ning patted Davu on the shoulder and said, "You did a great job. It's your tactics that have repelled the enemies on both wings. It's only been a short time." Davu's voice was loud, and everyone could hear his words clearly. Immediately, the soldiers of the 1st Brigade began to shout, "General, health is always victorious." Ning waved his hand gently, "The battle is not over yet. Keep preparing for battle." Davu also turned his head and shouted to his subordinates, "You all heard it, take your positions. The battle is not over yet." The soldiers who were all looking at this side reluctantly returned to their respective duties. Ning rode to the highest point of the hillside and took out a telescope to observe the situation below. The enemy's artillery bombardment did not stop, and shells whistled and fell near Ning from time to time. However, the fierce shooting just now took place on the back of the hillside, so there was not so much smoke in front, and it was relatively clear to see the enemy retreating down the mountain and the enemy's main camp at the foot of the mountain. Especially the enemy's main camp, Lafayette still had 20,000 people who had not been put into battle and were resting at the foot of the mountain. Ning saw officers on horseback running down the hill, apparently gathering the retreating troops. Ning muttered, "What a pity. The cavalry is holding back the enemy's cavalry. Otherwise, if they charge down, maybe the battle will end now." Davu, "Yes, the enemy will definitely deploy more troops in the next attack. That will be the real test." As soon as he finished speaking, a shell landed not far away, splashing the broken soil up to a height of 1 person. Ning and Davu were unmoved. At this time, someone on horseback came running from behind. "You two. I've pulled up the artillery again." Ning turned around and saw that it was Napoleon. Davu spoke first, "You did a good job, Bonaparte. The last wave of shotgun volleys almost killed him directly." Napoleon, "It's because of the good choice of terrain and this mobile artillery. In the future, the use of cavalry artillery will become a key to victory on the battlefield." As soon as he finished speaking, the cavalry artillery troops deployed on the top of the hill opened fire on the enemy down the hill again. "Ning, are there enough shells?" "There are enough shells. I have prepared a sufficient number of shells at the 2nd position I chose. Enough to give the enemy another good time." Napoleon said with a childlike smile, looking like a child who was having fun, "In this battle, my artillery alone has killed hundreds or thousands of casualties." Ning suddenly remembered the lame wounded soldier he saw on Davu Road. "They are all revolutionaries, but they have to hurt each other, damn it." Thinking of this, Ning couldn't help but resent Lafayette and the gentlemen of Paris. They must pay the price. Lafayette looked at the retreating troops in disbelief. "I can't believe it," he said angrily. "We deployed twice the number of troops, but were defeated so easily. It's been less than an hour since the attack began." Berthier looked very calm. "The enemy should have taken advantage of the hillside. If we deploy troops on the reverse slope, our artillery can hardly hit the enemy. Lafayette, let our artillery push the cannons forward." Berthier looked embarrassed. "Our cannons are all heavy 12-pound cannons, which are difficult to push up. I suggest that we can retreat first, retreat to the terrain suitable for our operations, and then seek a decisive battle." Lafayette said angrily, "No. The enemy occupies the high ground. Once we start to retreat, the enemy suddenly rushes down the mountain in the chaos, and we are doomed. Even if we can retreat successfully. We have 40,000 people, but we retreated in front of 15,000 people. Morale will be destroyed. If they come to burn the camp again tonight, we will all be commanders alone tomorrow morning." Exclamation mark. Lafayette thought for a while and issued an order, "Immediately gather the retreating troops and line up on both sides of the 1st Division. Let's attack again." At this moment, the officer in charge of observing the hill suddenly shouted, "The enemy has retreated from the hill." Lafayette hurriedly looked to the top of the hill, and saw that the military flag that had been flying on the top of the hill began to retreat. Chapter 141 A Little Trick. Ning looked at the numerous enemies at the foot of the mountain, stroking his chin and thinking about countermeasures. Suddenly, he asked Davu, "Does your army have wine?" "Davu, my troops are not scattered soldiers. There are no female bartenders carrying alcohol with them." Ning was shocked, then turned to Napoleon and said, "Your artillery team has gunpowder carts, right?" Napoleon looked puzzled. "Yes, what's the matter?" Ning slapped his thigh. "Get a few carts of gunpowder and put them in the barn and the mill." Napoleon nodded. "That's easy. I'll get a few carts of gunpowder right away. Davu, do you want to abandon the hill? And Ning, yes, the purpose of holding here is to make the enemy stop and fight us here. Now this goal has been achieved. Throw gunpowder in the mill and barn, and when the enemy comes up, ignite it with lime bombs. Boom. Napoleon, we have special incendiary bombs, which are faster. And Ning, well said. The ignition is up to you. And the gunpowder, hurry up and transport it. Napoleon saluted Ning, understood. Then he turned his horse's head and galloped away. Soon, the wagons carrying gunpowder were driven over, hidden in the barn and the mill, and the horses were ridden away by the grooms. Ning, Davu, retreat. Sing the Roman hymn while retreating. You are the victors, show it. Davu saluted, leave it to me. He turned around and gave orders to the troops. So the 1st Brigade quickly evacuated the original defensive position and formed 4 neat columns on the road. The military flag led the way to the drumbeats of the military band, and the main force followed closely behind. Davu walked beside the team, like an ordinary non-commissioned officer, and he started as he walked. Let's go, children of the motherland. The glorious day has come. We have raised the flag of resistance in the face of tyranny. They raised the bloody flag. Listen, in the wilderness of the motherland, the brutal soldiers are roaring. They came to our homes and slaughtered our children. Arm up, free citizens. Forward, forward. Use their dirty blood to irrigate our fields. And Ning watched the 1st Brigade, which was singing the war song, retreat. Davu would take them to the back of the 4 brigades that were now deployed as the general reserve for the entire battle. Now, only Napoleon's cavalry artillery remained on the hill. Although the gunners had several carts of gunpowder, they were still firing desperately, without being affected at all. Napoleon rode to Ning and said, you go down. I will command the cavalry artillery. Don't worry. And Ning looked at the several infantry guns that were abandoned by Davu's troops and said, you assign a few people to operate these infantry guns. When the enemy comes up, run away on horseback. Understood, I will operate it myself. Napoleon said and rode away again. A moment later, he rode back with a few gunners. They dismounted next to the infantry guns and began to load. Napoleon took aim himself and then lit the fuse. The cannon roared. And Ning listened to the cannon fire right next to his ear and observed the impact point with a telescope. He saw the shells of the infantry artillery fell into the bushes at the foot of the mountain and broke a bush. And Ning observed Lafayette's formation again and found that the officers on horseback were gathering the remnants with great efficiency and spreading on both wings of Lafayette's main force. And Ning cursed. He also wanted to have such an efficient and experienced team of officers. Unfortunately, the officers of his troops were all non-commissioned officers promoted from ordinary people. They could not be so efficient for the time being. Once the troops were dispersed, there was no chance to gather. And Ning once again realized how difficult a battle he was facing was. However, he had already repelled the enemy's attack once, and his side had almost no losses except for Davu's 1st Brigade. The 8,000 people ambushed on the back slope were basically fully equipped. Defeating 20,000 enemy troops with such a small loss was enough to be called a brilliant victory. But Ning couldn't just win this one, he had to win both games, otherwise he would have to spit out what he had just won. At this time, a trumpet sounded from the foot of the mountain. Then the enemy troops at the foot of the mountain began to advance. Lafayette, all troops attack. No matter what the enemy is up to, as long as we have enough troops, we can overwhelm the enemy. Forward. Berthier immediately whispered a few words to the trumpeter, and then the trumpeters played the melody of the whole army advancing. The military band of the 1st Division immediately began to play music, and the troops of the 1st Division, which had just been resting on the spot, began to advance to the beat of the drums. The fleeing soldiers who had just finished gathering on the 2 wings of the 1st Division were a step late before they moved forward together. The shells from the top of the mountain fell around the advancing column, but the pounds of these shells were relatively small, and they could only knock down a few people when they hit the team. Only the few guns under the beach in the center were 12-pound heavy guns, and the shells could knock down 7 or 8 people when they scraped through the column. However, this was the maximum damage that solid bullets could cause at this distance. The battle-hardened troops would naturally not be shaken by such a degree of killing. However, the entire 1st Division did not sleep much last night, and now they were quite tired. For a moment, Lafayette doubted whether he could win with such a tired army. But he immediately dispelled this doubt. He must win today. He has more than 3 times the force advantage. If he can't win, the name of the hero of the War of Independence will be over. If he loses this battle, the whole of France will no longer recognize him as a hero, and Andy Frost, the leatherworker, will become the most outstanding military strategist in France. This is absolutely not allowed. Lafayette must win today. And Ning was observing the effect of the bombardment on the mountain. Suddenly he discovered something and asked Napoleon, who was operating the artillery himself, "Where are your quicklime bullets? Why didn't I see you use them?" "Napoleon, the hit rate of that kind of shells is too poor. They often explode in the air and then scatter on the open ground where there is no one. I trust live ammunition more than quicklime bombs." And Ning curled his lips. The hit rate of artillery in this era is already terrible. Things like quicklime shells and shrapnel shells had to be ignited before firing, and there was no way to predict when they would explode, which resulted in an even worse hit rate. No wonder Napoleon didn't trust these things. As for solid ricochet shells, their hit rate was actually okay when facing a large group of enemies marching in horizontal rows. It was not until the use of trigger detonators in the shells that shrapnel shells and lime shells had a more satisfactory hit rate. And Ning remembered that in Total War Empire, this was already a very late artillery technology. And Ning thought that he should find a way to find a scientist to improve the artillery technology. Wait, I remember that the father of chemistry, Lavoisier, is still alive. And Ning was thinking about this when Laser Carnot came on horseback. "Sir, you should go down quickly. The enemy is attacking again. It's too dangerous here. We need you to stay at the headquarters." And Ning was about to answer when an enemy shell hit the artillery fort a few meters away from Ning and directly hit the wicker basket filled with stones, causing the wicker of the basket to collapse, and the stones flew out, injuring several artillerymen. And Ning was also hit on the forehead, but he had a special physique, so the stone made a sound of duong. But the blood still had to flow, and a stream of blood directly covered half of Ning's eyes, making half of his vision red. Laser Carnot was shocked. "Are you okay?" And Ning was very calm. "It's okay, just a minor injury." He wiped the blood off his face and took out a handkerchief to press the wound. "Napoleon, you'd better go down quickly. It's too dangerous here. At least retreat out of the threat of enemy artillery. And Ning, don't make a fuss, keep shooting." Napoleon did as he was told. Several artillerymen looked at each other, obviously impressed by the courage shown by Ning. Even the artilleryman who was just injured by a stone struggled to get up and continued to operate the artillery. "Lazare Carnot, go down quickly. You can't play any role here." And Ning kicked the bloody handkerchief back into his pocket and said to Napoleon, "Everything is up to you. Remember, when the enemy climbs up the mountain, use burning points to set fire to the barns and mills. Napoleon, don't worry. I will operate the artillery myself." And Ning nodded, then raised his hand, whipped the horse's butt, and ran to his command position on the back slope. Chapter 142. Is this so terrifying? At this time, behind Lafayette's command position, near their camp, Lannes had taken a nap and just woke up. Lannes looked around suspiciously, trying to grasp the situation. He heard the rumble of artillery in the south. General is still fighting. Lannes thought, hasn't I done enough damage last night? At this time, he suddenly found that there were ragged soldiers gathered in a pile on the road, supporting each other and limping back. Lannes thought about it and came up with a plan. He tore off his sergeant rank and smeared more dirt on his body, so that his clothes were almost the same as those of officers. Then he jumped in front of the group of fleeing soldiers and shouted, "Which unit are you from?" The fleeing soldiers were startled and looked at Lannes in shock. Because Frost's troops and Lafayette's troops were both National Self-Defense Forces, with the same uniforms, but Ning's troops had to wrap a red cloth around them. Then the defeated soldier seemed to judge from his tone that Rana was an officer on his side, so he said, "We are the 13th Battalion, 4th Regiment, 2nd Brigade, 3rd Division, and we have been scattered." Rana: "Oh, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Robot of the 2nd Division. I'm under the order of General Lafayette to gather the troops and retreat." Deserter: "Retreat." Rana: "Yes, the enemy occupies an advantageous position, and the terrain is too great. We have to retreat to a position that suits us and fight them again." The defeated soldier was a little confused. "Why are you alone? Shouldn't a team be sent to do this kind of thing?" Rana: "I encountered the enemy stragglers who attacked us last night. I finally escaped. My team was scattered. Come with me now. We are going to burn the tents and prepare for retreat. We can't leave the camp after the retreat to the rebel bastards." The defeated soldiers looked at each other, and finally their eyes were focused on an old sergeant. The sergeant shook his head. "No, we can't help Lafayette. I saw it with my own eyes. Our 20,000 people were beaten and fled as soon as we crossed the hill. General Lafayette can't win this battle. Let's go." Land's eyes rolled when he heard it. "That's even better. I am Jean Lands, the captain of the training team under General Frost. It was I who led the night attack yesterday. Look at this." Lands took out a red ribbon. "This is how we identify the enemy and us. You follow me and pretend to have Lafayette's order to burn the tents. After you succeed, you will be rewarded." The defeated soldiers looked at each other, and finally looked at the old sergeant. The old sergeant stared at Lana suspiciously. Are you really General Frost's confidant? Are you the captain of the training team?" Lana patted his chest and said, "It's me. You should have heard that Mr. Frost particularly values a dying apprentice. I am the dying apprentice. My troops were scattered in the night attack last night, and today I am worried that no one will join me in sabotage. You all join now, and you are all great contributors." The old sergeant was still thinking about it, and a soldier couldn't help asking, "I heard that Mr. Frost rewards with silver instead of certificates." Lana nodded. "That's right. General Frost pays his soldiers with silver and has never issued certificates. You will definitely get a lot of silver if you fight with me." The old sergeant finally made up his mind and slapped his thigh. "Let's do it. Anyway, it's a mess now, and General Lafayette can't take care of his own tent. Let's go." Lafayette was watching his troops advance to the top of the mountain. From his position, he couldn't see Frost's formation on the back slope at all, so he was still a little worried. He could only keep comforting himself, saying that this time he would press forward, with a total of 30,000 men, and Frost's troops, minus the cavalry and artillery, would only have a little over 10,000 men, so 3 against 1 would always win. As long as they could successfully rush to the distance where they could fire and shoot at the enemy, the advantage of 3 against 1 would be reflected in firepower, and then Frost would have no choice but to admit defeat. Even if the enemy relied on the advantage of terrain and could not lose with volleys, as long as they entered into hand-to-hand combat, it would be pure meat grinder. In this way, the advantage of his own troops would be highlighted. The more Lafayette thought about it, the more he felt that he should rush up and engage in hand-to-hand combat. Although his troops were very tired, the 1st Division did not sleep well last night, and the 2nd and 3rd Divisions had just been defeated and had consumed a lot of physical energy, but as long as they entered into hand-to-hand combat in one go and played their advantage in strength, they would have the possibility of winning. And the chance of winning was very high. On the contrary, shooting at each other might cause problems. So Lafayette turned to Berthier and said, "Send a message, tell the commander of the 1st Brigade, Count Ornat, to charge after the first round of volleys." Berthier frowned slightly. "Are we going to charge?" "Yes, use our superiority in manpower to grind Frost's trousers to death." Trousers were originally used to describe the working trouser class in cities such as Paris. Lafayette used it to refer to Frost's troops to express his contempt. Berthier reminded, "The majority of our troops are also trousers. It doesn't matter. Anyway, charge up and fight. We have more officers and more soldiers, so we can win in hand-to-hand combat." Lafayette shouted. Berthier, "Okay, messenger." The messenger ran over, and Berthier wrote a handwritten order and stuffed it into his hand, to Count Ornat. "Yes." The messenger rode away on horseback. Lafayette once again focused his attention on the large army going up the mountain. The 30,000-strong army was organized into 4 columns, each with 3 rows, and they pressed towards the top of the mountain. Lafayette saw the momentum and regained a little smile on his face. "Frost, this time I will make you die without a burial place." If it was a Hong Kong comic, Lafayette would definitely laugh at this time. Then, just after he laughed for a while, someone next to him shouted, "There's a fire in the camp." Lafayette was shocked and looked back, only to find that behind him, in the direction of the camp, there were continuous flames. This is too scary, because in this era, not all troops will be pulled to the battlefield. A 40,000-strong army will leave at least a few thousand people to guard the camp. If it is the British Army, each regiment will leave half a battalion to guard the camp and be responsible for taking care of everything in the camp. Now that the camp is on fire, it means that the enemy has a strong force to launch a sneak attack. Lafayette couldn't figure out where Frost got the sneak attack troops from. Aren't his troops only 15,000? According to the cavalry reconnaissance report in the morning, His troops are all on the mountain in front of him. Where did this army come from? In panic, Lafayette suddenly felt that he could not understand Frost. Frost? He gasped and murmured, "This cobbler is so terrifying." Berthier was still very calm. "Since the enemy chose to attack the camp instead of sneak attacking our flank, it means that there are not many troops. It should be enough to deal with it if the reserve soldiers of the last brigade in hand are deployed." "Lafayette, you don't understand. Now that the camp is on fire, the morale of the attacking troops will be affected." He muttered, "Damn it, it's a good thing that Frost doesn't have enough cavalry, otherwise he would have deployed cavalry at this time and we would be finished." Among the attacking troops climbing the mountain, some people also discovered that the rear was on fire. More and more people began to turn their heads to look. The non-commissioned officers had to shout in unison, "Don't look back. The order we received is to move forward. Keep going." Fortunately, there are many old non-commissioned officers in Lafayette's troops, otherwise they would have run away before they climbed the mountain. But the seeds of anxiety have been planted. Lana stood in Lafayette's camp and shouted loudly, "Burn it! Everyone, hurry up!" That's right, Lafayette's idea was correct. And Ning really couldn't spare any troops to destroy his camp. The tents were burned by Lafayette's remaining troops. Lana relied on his momentum and the current chaotic situation to successfully make the defenders of the camp believe that it was Lafayette who ordered the burning of the tents. The defenders of the camp had already seen a large number of fleeing soldiers collapse, and then suddenly a high-handed officer came with a group of soldiers who seemed to have experienced a hard battle to pass on the order, and they believed it. So now thousands of defenders are burning the tents at full speed, preparing to retreat. Lana looked at these defenders and his heart was beating, thinking to himself, "General, you must win the battle. If you lose, I can't escape." Lafayette was very harsh in his treatment of soldiers. He once used stick punishment to treat soldiers who mutiny because of lack of military pay, that is, soldiers were tied to wheels and beaten to death with sticks. Lans did not want to taste the taste of stick punishment. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143, The Will to Break Through. Napoleon was on the hill, and he saw from afar that the enemy's camp behind the enemy was on fire. "It's that dying apprentice." Napoleon was delighted. "Fuck, what's his name? He does a great job, no wonder Andy thinks so highly of him. I thought Andy had made a mistake this time. Hey, do you remember the name of that dying apprentice?" The sergeant who was held by Napoleon hesitated for a moment, and said uncertainly, "I think his name is Lana." "Oh, yes, Lana. He did a great job. We can't lose. Reload quickly. After this round, load the shotgun. Quick." As soon as the voice fell, the loaded artillery opened fire. Amid the successive firings, an artilleryman asked worriedly, "The enemy is closer than last time. What if they stop firing?" Napoleon shouted, "Don't worry. They won't stop firing. Because they want to save the bullet for after they cross the ridgeline. A flintlock rifle only has one bullet in the barrel, and it must be reloaded after firing." Napoleon was sure that the enemy would save this bullet for after they cross the ridgeline. "Napoleon, we will fire 2 rounds of shotgun shells." 2 rounds. Another cannon was loaded, and the shotgun shells were scattered all over the place after being ignited. Napoleon's artillerymen fired in succession, and each cannon knocked down dozens of people. "Load." Napoleon shouted until his voice was almost hoarse. The artillerymen hurriedly wiped the barrels, loaded the pre-made gunpowder cartridges, and then stuffed all kinds of messes into the barrels and compacted them. The enemy's infantry team was just around the corner, and they could pounce on the artillerymen in a few steps. But they could only continue to march and step to the beat of the drums. Napoleon grabbed a torch and personally lit the nearest artillery. The 6-pounder spurted out long tongues of fire, and the pellets swept through the enemy formation like a storm. 7 or 8 people fell in front of Napoleon. A military musician was standing right in the middle of the storm, and he was not hurt by a single fragment. He hesitated and stopped, forgetting to beat the drum. But the artillery next to Napoleon fired, and this time the storm blew over the unfortunate guy and tore off his ear. Napoleon threw the torch and shouted, "Retreat." He jumped on his horse and ran along the ridgeline, urging, "Retreat. Move. The gunners dragged the gun carriage and ran for their lives. Fortunately, there was a ridgeline, so they quickly escaped the enemy's sight, otherwise they might be killed by the enemy's side of spitting fire. Ning was in his command position, and saw Napoleon's cavalry artillery troops running desperately to retreat from the ridge through a telescope. Because they were running too fast, one of the artillery carts flipped over, dragging the horses, pulling it to the ground. Napoleon rode past the overturned artillery carts. The artillerymen who got up from the ground also ran desperately, trying to leave the ridgeline. Then the enemy's flag appeared on the ridgeline. Ning, this Napoleon is really playing big. Isn't he afraid that the enemy will stop and shoot him? Cano, he is sure that the enemy will save the bullets until they cross the ridgeline. Ning curled his lips, and then ordered the artillery, fire. The sound of the artillery rumbled. Ning had just issued an order to let all troops fire freely after the artillery fired. So the volley of gunfire followed the sound of the artillery. The clear vision was suddenly filled with white smoke. The smoke from the volley of 8,000 people, plus the smoke from the artillery. Suddenly the whole battlefield became smoky again. Ning heard the enemy's command, "Stand still. Raise your guns. Fire." The crackling sound of gunfire seemed like a delayed echo. Ning saw that many of his troops who were loading bullets were shot. The wailing sound entered Ning's ears. "Mom! It is indeed impossible to have no casualties at all." When Ning thought about this, the second column of the enemy crossed the ridgeline. Damn, this huge number of enemy soldiers, it is still a bit pessimistic. The 3-to-1 numerical disadvantage is too big. Napoleon retreated to the position. He jumped off the horse directly, forcibly pulled the reins of the horse towing a cannon, and stopped the horse. "Quick, load the incendiary bombs!" Napoleon shouted, and at the same time he took off the gun carriage hanging behind the horse. The artillerymen immediately dismounted and operated the guns. Napoleon patted the gun body and urged, "Quick! Quick! Loading is complete!" The gunner shouted. Napoleon personally inserted the fuse into the breech block, then raised his right hand and raised his thumb to measure the distance. Then he adjusted the inclination of the gun body, and then grabbed the torch of the soldier next to him and lit the fuse. The cannon roared, and a shell whizzed across the battlefield and hit the barn. It was an incendiary bomb, and the fuse was sizzling. The second column of the enemy was crossing the ridgeline. In a flash, the incendiary bomb exploded, instantly igniting the thatch of the barn. It was the height of summer, and the fire suddenly ignited, and then there was a violent explosion. The whole barn was blown into a small fireball, rising up like a fleeting mushroom. The nearest enemies were all thrown to the ground by the hurricane of the explosion. Enemies farther away turned their heads and stared at the rising flames. Farragut was at the bottom of the mountain, startled by the sudden explosion. "What? This? Berthier, it's a trap, sir. But it's harmless and won't kill many people." "What are you talking about, idiot? The key is not how many people will be killed. It's..." Lafayette paused, lowered his head and murmured, "No, no. Absolutely not. He only has 10,000 people. How dare he fight 30,000 people in hand-to-hand combat?" Ning looked at the rising fireball. The whole battlefield seemed to be quiet all of a sudden. He saw in the smoke, the enemy soldiers turned back one after another, looking at the sudden change behind them in astonishment. Ning suddenly had an idea. He didn't know where the certainty came from. Anyway, he felt that he should charge at this time. So he said to Laser Cano, "Blow the charge." Cano asked in astonishment, "Charge? We are outnumbered, so we shouldn't engage in hand-to-hand combat." "I say," Ning interrupted the chief of staff, "blow the charge." Cano said nothing, turned his head and ordered the bugler, "Blow the charge." Ning turned his head and said to the flag-bearer holding his general's flag, "You, follow me closely." The flag-bearer didn't have so many opinions, and directly replied, "Yes, General." When Laser Cano heard this, he showed an expression that he wanted to stop it. The general's flag actually has the greatest function of telling the messenger where the headquarters is, so that it is convenient to pass on information. Generally, it is not appropriate to move the position of the general's flag casually in a war. Just now, Laser Cano and Ning had left the command position, and the general's flag was still in place. Without waiting for Laser Cano to speak, Ning drew his sword. At this time, the blood on his forehead caused by the stone had not dried yet, and the slight pain reminded Ning that he had a special physique and was not easy to die. He was ready to make use of this advantage. After all, it was time to use all the means at hand. and Ning whipped the white horse's buttocks hard, and the horse galloped away, the long sword raised high flashing with cold light. Chapter 144, Kill the general and seize the flag. And Ning galloped in the wind ruffling his temples. At this moment, he didn't need to think about complicated things like tactics and strategy, just focus on slashing and killing. He chose the enemy's front flag as his target, leaned against the horse's back, and galloped. The saber raised high above his head reflected the sunlight like a torch. The flag bearer followed closely behind him, holding the general's flag high. The 3rd and 4th brigades were arranged in the middle of Ning's line. The soldiers of these 2 brigades saw Ning rushing to the enemy line. "General, charge!" someone shouted. "Yes, General, charge!" Just at this time, the charge horn sounded, and the non-commissioned officers of each team heard the horn and ordered, "Everyone, charge!" So the people of the 2 brigades rushed up with a roar, like a tiger descending from the mountain. The 2 brigades closer to the edge couldn't see what was happening here, nor did they see the general's flag rushing to the enemy line, but they saw the momentum of the friendly army next door, and they were also inspired, howling and rushing towards the enemy. The enemy was still confused, just stunned by the huge explosion behind them, and then the thunderous shouts of killing sounded, and the soldiers with bayonets rushed through the white smoke produced by the shooting. And Ning's troops had just repelled the enemy's attack with volleys, and now their morale was high. When they charged, everyone was fierce and heroic. In contrast, Lafayette's troops were unstable and had just been ambushed, so they were in a state of panic. At this moment, someone suddenly shouted, "Our flag has fallen." And Ning set his target on the enemy's front flag from the beginning. In this era, the army was not well organized, and everyone recognized the flag. When charging, they would follow the flag and charge. If the flag fell, they would fall into chaos. And Ning went straight to the flag. On the way to the flag, he saw an officer raising a pistol at him. It was only a moment, and the next moment the white smoke blocked his sight. And Ning didn't feel like he was shot, so he simply ignored it and ran straight to the flag. He knew that he was not good at slashing on horseback, so he simply laid down his long sword and planned to cut the flag off as he passed by. The crossover happened in an instant. And Ning felt that the long sword in his hand had hit the target, and when he turned around, he found that the flag had fallen to the ground with a bang. Success. The falling of the flag may be just a small ripple, but it spread into a wave of collapse in a short time. The enemy in front of Ning turned around and ran away, and then all the enemies in the first row turned around and ran away. The second column was still moving forward and ran into their own people who were fleeing. The team fell into chaos in the crowd. Many people were pushed down and trampled. The third column had just crossed the ridgeline, but they were stunned by the chaos. I don't know which sergeant took out his gun and shot a deserter, which caused the panicked troops to raise their guns and shoot. After the volley of gunfire, the chaos also involved the third column, and everyone was in chaos. Countless people were pushed down and then trampled, and there were cries everywhere. At this time, Napoleon fired a cannon at the mill. A moment later, the mill exploded as big as the barn. Instantly, the total collapse occurred. The huddled enemies began to flee down the mountain. Ning rode his horse and chopped down several people, but only half of them were killed. He simply stopped chopping and shouted, "National Army, forward! Disperse them completely." At this time, he turned around and suddenly found that Davout's troops had not moved, so he shouted, "Davout, forward!" However, the whole battlefield was filled with shouts and killing, and Ning's voice was directly swallowed up. He could only catch a young man who was rushing with a gun, tear off his general's rank and give it to him. "Kid, take this and run back. Find Captain Davout and let his brigade start to move forward." When the young man saw that it was Ning, he immediately tensed his body and saluted, "I guarantee to complete the mission." Then he turned around and ran, running through the chaotic melee like a loach. And Ning raised his knife again, "Follow me, forward." On Davout's side, a sergeant begged, "Captain, let's go too." Davout shook his head, "No, we got the order to be the general reserve. Without orders, we can't move." At this time, a soldier ran to the front of the 1st Brigade and asked, "Who is Davout?" "The bald one." A sergeant answered. Davout cursed, "Damn it, I still have some hair." The soldier ran over, saluted, and then stretched out his hand to show General Frost's epaulets. "The general gave me this as a token. He ordered you to move forward." Davout took the epaulets, turned his head and said to everyone, "You heard it too. General Frost ordered us to move forward." Military musicians, Play music. The military musicians immediately beat the drums, and at the same time, the entire brigade began to march in place, swaying left and right in unison with the drums. Davu drew his sword, forward. Then he took the lead and walked in front, followed by the flag bearer holding the brigade flag. After walking 2 steps, Davu felt that the momentum was not enough, so he began to sing, "Forward, sons and daughters of the motherland, rise up. A glorious day awaits you." The 1st Brigade sang the majestic Marseillaise in unison, "No, Ode to Rome," and pushed forward like a steamroller. Faced with such a strong momentum, could Lafayette's army resist? The answer is no. Because this momentum is so strong, nothing can stop it. When Lafayette saw the large group of troops retreating from the top of the mountain, he was shocked. What happened? What happened after the troops pushed to the top of the mountain? Did Frost really dare to charge it himself with 30,000 people? Then Lafayette saw Frost's general flag appear next to the burning barn. In front of the flag, there was a white horse, galloping, chasing a large number of fleeing soldiers. Behind him were rows of National Guard soldiers. Their uniforms were exactly the same as those of the National Guard except for a red hoop on their arms, but the temperament they exuded was completely different. Obviously, they were all Frost's troops. The fleeing soldiers surged towards the positions around Lafayette like a tide, and also swept in the artillery that was still holding the positions. Soon, the artillerymen also dropped their cannons and ammunition carts and started running. Lafayette stammered, "What's going on? What happened? How could they defeat our army with such a huge numerical advantage? Even if they were 30,000 pigs, they shouldn't be defeated so quickly. Berthier, if you transfer the brigade that was just transferred to the camp and stabilize the situation." Lafayette interrupted Berthier, "No, it's too late. You see, the enemy is rushing all the way down, and we have no chance to gather the troops again." At this time, troops with tricolor flags appeared on the top of the hill. They sang Ode to Rome composed by Frost and Ludwig Beethoven, and walked down the valley in a heroic and vigorous manner. The appearance of these troops accelerated the escape of the fleeing soldiers. Even though the pursuers had stopped and started walking because they were tired, they were still running madly, as if the god of death was chasing them from behind. Berthier then sent out the cavalry to intercept Frost. Lafayette shrugged his head, "We have lost a battle. Let's retreat." Lafayette looked indignantly at Frost, who was riding down the mountain, pulled the reins to turn the horse's head, and kicked the horse's belly. The horse trotted away, and the flag-bearer, the bugler and a group of officers followed Lafayette and fled in disgrace. Ning pulled the reins and stopped the horse. The pursuing troops had exhausted their strength and stood there cheering. Lazare Canet rode up and reported to Ning, "The enemy has abandoned so many guns and equipment that they can no longer organize an army before returning to Paris." "Ning, I know. The most urgent thing now is that I want to know the situation of the cavalry, and find lands." Canet pointed to the side, "The cavalry is coming." And Ning turned her head and saw the cavalry girls coming over the hill and appearing in her field of vision. They were all dressed in blood and looked like they had just returned from the Shurahel. Christina took the lead and walked in front, shouting to Ning from a distance, "Andy! Congratulations! You won so beautifully." And Ning smiled slightly, pulled the reins to make the horse turn around, and waited for the girls to come over. "You have worked hard," and Ning said, "Without you holding back the enemy cavalry, we would never have won such a glorious victory." Christina, glorious victory? No, this is not something that can be described as glorious, this is a miracle. Davu, who had arrived at some point, said, "Yes, this is a miracle. I have never heard of such a glorious victory in the history of war." And Ning was about to answer when Napoleon came running from a distance on his horse, shouting as he ran, "Andy! This is a miracle. You have eclipsed the heroes of ancient Rome. You are the contemporary Caesar." And Ning smiled and said jokingly, "Then should I change my last name to Augustus?" Napoleon, of course. While others were praising Ning, Laser Cano was worrying about business. He asked Christina, "Where's Ms. Oliver, the commander of the cavalry?" "Christina, we don't know. People got separated in the melee. After I dispersed the enemy, I gathered a small team and rushed to the front. After all, Andy, General may need people to attack the enemy. But we are still late. You won too quickly. It's been more than 2 hours, and there are 40,000 enemies." And Ning looked up at the sun in the sky. Only then did he notice that the sun had not begun to set. It was probably only 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The battle was over in more than 2 hours. It was indeed a bit too fast. Could it be that I really have some talent? Chapter 145 Prisoner Lafayette. And Ning immediately dismissed this idea. After all, he was an old office worker in his 30s, and he was no longer a young man who was easily inflated. Moreover, he had been inflated several times before, and each time he was quickly hit hard by reality and taught a lesson. He said to himself, I just imitated the Duke of Wellington's tactics, and the successful implementation was all thanks to the bravery of the famous generals under my command. If I had to talk about my own contribution, it was just the small idea of using gunpowder ambush. But other people obviously didn't think so. We were able to defeat the enemy so quickly, all thanks to the unparalleled strategy of the general. The final victory was also due to the morale boosted by the general personally charging into the battle and killing the enemy. Napoleon, I saw it all. When your general flag rushed out, Andy, I knew we were going to win. And Ning, well, it was mainly because at that moment I thought of a stone jumping off my head, and I felt that my system would probably be difficult to die. It's a bit like playing Mountain Blade 2 and turning on the player's damage reduction, but the troops are all injured, so they will fight hard in the battle and use themselves to attract fire to reduce the casualties of their own troops. Of course, when Ning did this, he was shot by a friendly javelin from time to time, and the damage reduction was useless. I can only say that fortunately reality is not a game after all. But now Ning couldn't tell the truth and could only smile and said, I did it on the spur of the moment. Christina was shocked. You went into the battlefield to kill the enemy yourself. More than that, he took a flag bearer and rushed towards 30,000 enemies alone. Are you crazy? This is too dangerous. Christina exclaimed, what if something happens? If you die, the troops might collapse. And Ning, I'm not dead, am I? Moreover, even if the main general of a modern army is killed, it will not collapse easily. After all, there is such a thing as a command sequence. Napoleon, that's right. Only when the general is brave can the soldiers be brave. A general should be like this. It's a pity that I am an artillery commander and cannot go to the battlefield in person. No, you will later rush to a bridge with a flag in your own hand, and then realize your destiny in the process. And Ning waved his hand. Okay, this problem is over. Cano. Laser Cano responded, I'm here, General. Organize people and clean up the battlefield. Yes, General. And Ning turned to Christina, as for you, although you can't catch up with the battle, I need you to search in the direction of Lafayette's camp. Your task is to find Jean Lance who attacked the enemy camp last night. He should have attacked another wave of enemy camps just now. Find him and bring him to me. He is the great hero of this battle. Christina saluted, leave it to me. Ladies, follow me. Christina and Clarice led the cavalry and galloped towards the enemy camp that was still on fire in the distance. My troops played a significant role this time, so I have a request. And Ning, go ahead. My soldiers think that there is nothing on the flag of the 1st Brigade and it is not recognizable enough. They hope to add something to symbolize this victory. And Ning, then what do you want to add? It has not been decided yet. I plan to let the soldiers vote. Okay, tell me when you have made your choice. And Ning agreed readily. This is a good thing. It can increase the tradition of the troops and help increase the cohesion of the troops. He thought for a moment and added, in the future, it should become a system. Units that perform well can add the representative symbol of this battle on their flags. Napoleon immediately said, it's a good idea, but isn't it a bit unfair to the artillery? And Ning, each company in the artillery can also have a separate flag. Napoleon smiled, really? Then I will make a special flag for the cavalry artillery company I command. And Ning, okay, you can have the soldiers vote for an object at a meeting, and then have the tailor show it on the flag. After saying that, and Ning suddenly thought that in this way, the cavalry unit should also have a special object, but it's a pity that Christina took the troops to perform the mission. Forget it, let's talk about it later. Lafayette was retreating to the nearest city with his entourage and staff. Suddenly, 2 knights galloped on their horses and caught up with Lafayette's team. No, General. The leader shouted, the enemy's cavalry is catching up. Lafayette was shocked. What? The enemy's cavalry should be fighting almost as well as our cavalry. It's true, General. The leader looked anxious. They are not far behind, and they will catch up soon. As soon as the voice fell, the horn of the cavalry caught up with Lafayette's small unit from behind. Then a group of cavalry crossed the horizon and appeared in the field of vision. Lafayette was shocked and whipped his horse's butt with a whip, urging the horse to move forward. As a result, before the horse ran 2 steps, another cavalry unit in front bypassed a hedge in front and blocked the way. Soon, the 2 cavalry units in front and behind surrounded Lafayette's small unit. When he was far away, Lafayette still had a fluke, thinking that his cavalry unit might have made a mistake. When he got closer, he knew that he had failed this time. Because these cavalrymen were all female knights, they all had breasts and long hair. An old lady in her 40s who looked a little old rushed to the front and shouted at Lafayette, "Surrender! We are all nobles and we will not kill surrendered soldiers." Lafayette held down the guards who were about to resist and sighed, "Forget it, surrender." When the old lady approached, he loudly announced his identity, "I am the Marquis Lafayette, the commander of the rebel army, and I demand to be treated decently." The old lady slowed down and announced her home address in a loud voice, "I am Oliver, the commander of the Knights Guard, and the cavalry commander of General Frost." Lafayette frowned, "You are obviously the commander of the Knights Guard of the King of France. Why are you helping that traitor?" Ms. Oliver responded, "Our general has not violated the Constitution in any way, he has not betrayed France. The gentleman in Paris must have made a mistake." Lafayette curled his lips, "We will know, we will know." Ms. Oliver finally arrived in front of him. She pulled the reins to stop the horse, then drew her sword and picked off Lafayette's general's epaulets. "You are my prisoner, General. Just follow me and I will ensure your safety." Lafayette nodded, led the way. "I also want to meet this son of the shoemaker." Berthier muttered, "This son of the shoemaker is now the most outstanding general in France." Lafayette, "Yes, we should give this title to him." Chapter 146, Triumphant Song. Mr. Burrough, the current Speaker of the County Parliament, was anxiously waiting for news from the battlefield. Deputy Speaker Duncan tried to probe, "How about we first capture the people that the leatherworker left in Conta, and when General Lafayette's army enters the city? If we capture them now, what if General Frost wins?" Burrough slapped the table, "No. We can't act rashly, let's wait for news from the front. How can we win? General Lafayette has 40,000 troops. 40,000. That leatherworker only has 10,000. As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of horse hooves came from outside the door. Speaker Burrough immediately turned around, walked to the front door in 3 steps, opened the door and rushed out, and then saw General Frost's royal musician Ludwig von Beethoven turning over and getting off his horse. Speaker Burrough, Mr. Beethoven. How's the situation? Beethoven looked up and saw that it was the speaker, so he smiled and said, "A great victory. You were not there. I was less than 100 meters behind the general's command post at the time, and I saw with my own eyes that the general personally led the army to charge. Lafayette's troops were as fragile as butter in front of the general's army, and were swept away in an instant. That scene had a huge impact on me, and I was inspired in an instant. So I came back, and I want to turn this shock into music. I want to write a song to praise the general's heroic posture of personally charging." After that, Beethoven began to hum, and even Speaker Burrough, a layman in music, could hear that it was indeed a very majestic and cheerful song. The deputy speaker followed the speaker out, and he asked with an incredible expression on his face, "Won? You mean, General Frost defeated Lafayette's 40,000 people? How is this possible?" Beethoven, "Yes, we won. When I left the battlefield, Lafayette had already fled. Frost's army swept through like a whirlwind and was cleaning up the enemy's defeated soldiers. A messenger should come to report soon. I won't say any more. I'm going to compose music. Now I need to fight with a music score all night long." After saying that, Beethoven went into his house opposite the city hall with excitement. The speaker and the deputy speaker looked at each other. The deputy speaker still had an expression of disbelief on his face. "How is it possible? That's 40,000 people." Speaker Burrough, "Beethoven doesn't look like he's lying. Hurry up and prepare a celebration banquet. I know that many people are secretly preparing to welcome Lafayette. Now is the perfect time to take out the things to welcome General Frost's triumphant return." The deputy speaker shook his head, "No, I can't believe it. Butler, prepare the horse. I want to go to the scene to see it myself." At the scene, Laser Carnot was reporting casualties to Ning. "According to preliminary statistics, the total loss of our army's various units is 2,300 people. Whether it is dead or injured needs further statistics." The medical center in the rear currently accommodates 1,700 wounded soldiers. Ending, 2,000 casualties? That's completely acceptable. Remember, the families of the fallen soldiers must be found, and each family member will be given 5 gold louis and a piece of church land as a reward. Some soldiers who were listening exclaimed, 5 gold louis. And land. And Ning turned around and said to the exclaiming soldier, if you die, your family can also get so much? Do you want to die? The soldier hesitated for a moment, but still shook his head. No, I'd rather live. Davu had a fierce face. Don't be lazy here. Go to work and clean up the battlefield. The eavesdropping soldiers went to work reluctantly. Davu turned around and said to Ning, General, this pension is a bit too much, 5 gold louis. It's too much? Only because we have less losses this time can we do this. At this time, Napoleon Bonaparte rode over and said to Ning, Andy, look who's coming. And Ning looked in the direction Napoleon pointed, and saw Lance leading a group of people, walking towards him arrogantly. He was overjoyed, and hurried forward and gave Lance a hug. Lana. Great, you are alive. Lance smiled and said, not only am I alive, I also brought you a troop. Look. These are Lafayette's troops. As soon as I told them, they came to you, General. And Ning was shocked. Lance had this ability? Lance took Ning to a sergeant. Look, this is a sergeant from Lafayette's 2nd Division, and behind him are his brothers. I said I was the captain of your training team, and they all switched sides. The sergeant saluted Ning, General Frost. We have heard that you are brave and good at fighting, and we want to fight under your command. And Ning, okay. You are a soldier under my command now. Then he turned to Laser Cano and said, tell the troops that the prisoners who are willing to serve me are welcome to join army. When Lana saw Cano, he stepped forward and asked, by the way, Chief of Staff, how many members of the teaching team I took out for a night attack last night have returned? Cano was embarrassed. Well, actually, up to now, a total of 10 people have returned. Lana, 10? How could there be so few? It must be because of the chaos last night that they had. They are all elite and loyal soldiers, and they won't die so easily. And Ning held Lana's shoulder. Lana, missions like night attacks have a high casualty rate, so don't worry about it. By the way, I asked Christina from the cavalry to lead the team to look for you. Did you see him? Lana shook his head. No. I recruited the defeated soldiers along the way and came here directly. I didn't encounter any cavalry. And Ning, then you missed each other. At this time, a soldier on the lookout shouted, our cavalry is back. And Ning immediately turned her head to look, and saw a large group of cavalry heading this way. They soon came closer, and Ning took a look. Wow, not only Christina and Clarice were there, but also the commander of the cavalry regiment, Old Lady Oliver. Oliver stopped in front of the Ning, saluted, and then proudly reported, General, Oliver salutes you on behalf of the entire cavalry regiment. And Ning also saluted, my respected lady, where have you been? When only Christina reported to me just now, I thought I had lost you forever. Christina smiled and said, she went to catch a big fish for you. Look who this is. And Ning looked in the direction of Christina's hand, and saw a group of captives who were tied up and riding on horses. And Ning, Berthier, and Lafayette. And Ning had always wanted to capture Berthier and make him the chief of staff, so when he saw the group of prisoners, he called out Berthier's name first, and then he thought that he should call Lafayette first. After all, he was the commander-in-chief of the entire army. Lafayette was furious. What do you mean? Frost. You defeated me on the battlefield, deprived me of my honor, and now you want to insult me verbally. And Ning, no, I didn't mean that. It's just that I am impressed by Berthier's staff work. He arranged everything in the army in order. Berthier looked depressed. Is this a sarcasm? And Ning realized that it sounded like a sarcasm. I absolutely did not mean that. Come on, untie the gentlemen. Their performance in today's battle is also remarkable. Especially after the first wave of attack was defeated by me, they gathered the troops very quickly, which impressed me. Lafayette became even more angry. What? Are you finding ways to ridicule me, saying that my command today is useless? And Ning, so you lost 40,000 against 10,000, I don't know how you lost. Lafayette, you. If you hadn't launched a despicable surprise attack last night. You actually think that I won only because of the sneak attack? It seems that your understanding of the art of war is just so-so. You can't even understand how wonderful the tactics I use today are." And Ning mocked unceremoniously. "Do you understand the reverse slope tactics? Wellington's signature. Isn't it awesome? I made it." Lafayette was so angry that he blew his beard. At this time, Lance suddenly came to Ning and whispered, "General, before going to the expedition, Lafayette killed a soldier who was dissatisfied with a military pay. Now the soldier's brother wants to sue him." And Ning, "Really?" He glanced at Lafayette, then raised his voice, "I will decide for that soldier. Blood debt must be paid with blood. Right? Double quotation mark. Chapter 147, The Trial of Lafayette. As soon as Ning finished speaking, Lazare Carnot grabbed Ning and whispered in his ear, "Don't be like this. If you punish Lafayette for this, those officers who originally wanted to defect may change their minds. We are short of officers." And Ning thought calmly, it seemed to be the case. But then he recalled a few of Napoleon's more powerful marshals in another time and space. Massena was an Italian and was born into a commoner family. Murat's family ran a small hotel, and they were commoners. Soult's father was a notary, and he was also a bourgeois, a commoner. Nee's family made beer barrels, so of course they were also commoners. Jordan's father was a surgeon, and he bought cloth himself, and he was a small vendor, so he was naturally a commoner. And Ning counted all the way, it seemed that more than half of Napoleon's marshals were born into commoners. Berthier, who was a more powerful one among the nobles, was now a prisoner, and one was Napoleon, who was now his supporter. And Davout, who was born in a military family and was a noble, but his family fell into poverty and he was actually closer to the common people. It seemed that if the nobles didn't come, they wouldn't come. It wouldn't have any impact, right? Moreover, Ning's military honors were so high now, and many nobles came to him for his military honors. In this battle, Ning had not yet deployed his own sunset knights. These people must have been furious, watching the common people get merits. In the next battle, they would definitely work twice as hard and rush to dangerous positions. After making up his mind, Ning responded to Carnot loudly so that everyone could hear his words, "Yes, dealing with Lafayette for a soldier may keep the officers away from us. But this will also make the National Guard of France side with us. It will make all the citizens of France side with us. Do you understand, Laser? This is to declare to all citizens that everyone is equal in our army. The reason why officers are officers is not because of their special status, but because they are loved by ordinary soldiers. This is very important. In my army, officers must be respected by the soldiers in order to win the support of the people. They must not use torture and terror to deal with the soldiers." When Ning was speaking, all the soldiers around him stopped what they were doing and listened attentively. As soon as Ning finished speaking, they immediately burst into thunderous applause and cheers. Davout was also listening nearby. As an old officer and a nobleman, his expression was very complicated, but when Ning finished speaking, he also applauded and cheered with everyone else. Perhaps it is not so easy for people to get rid of the influence of their background, but he still chose to agree with Ning's approach. Lafayette saw this and couldn't help but get anxious. Since the 100 Years' War between England and France, there has been no precedent of killing surrendered officers. Even if you tie me up for ransom, it would be fine. And Ning smiled. "General Lafayette, you probably don't know that soon the blood of the nobles will flow like a river throughout France." And Ning was talking about the later Jacobin terror period, when beheading was like chopping melons. Nobles, capitalists and petty bourgeoisie were beheaded every day in the squares of Paris. It was called equality for all beings. Even the leaders of the Jacobins could not escape the fate of being equal in the end. However, it was precisely because of the rule of the Jacobins that all these things were swept away that France entered a new era. Unfortunately, Emperor Napoleon changed it back later. Later, during the Battle of the Three Emperors, the chief of staff of the Russian-Austrian Allied forces, Villadel, said, "Republic? Napoleon destroyed half of it himself. Now we have to destroy the remaining half." Thinking of this, Ning couldn't help but look at Napoleon more. If I were here, maybe I could make Napoleon less ruined in the future? Ning deliberately didn't think about the other possibility. He kept comforting himself that Napoleon was so ambitious that he would want to be emperor when he wanted to. Although Ning originally meant that the Jacobins would kill people in the future, the people around him didn't know the future history, so they heard a different meaning. Obviously, General Frost wanted to make the French nobles bleed. Many soldiers immediately started gossiping. "Look, the nobles are in trouble. The general was once a famous noble killer. It is said that he fought 14 duels and killed 14 nobles who didn't know what was good for them. No, I heard it was 16 times. He threw away his gloves and killed all the nobles who looked down on him because he was a leather worker. And Ning didn't hear the soldiers' gossip. He said to Lazare Cano, "Tie up Lafayette again. Keep him under strict supervision. Leave the troops to clean up the battlefield, and the others will rest tonight and return to Canton tomorrow." The next day, everyone in Canton knew the news of General Frost's great victory. They rushed out of the city, looking forward to the triumphant return of Frost's army. The speaker and the deputy speaker, along with all the respectable gentlemen in Canton, were waiting outside the city. Deputy Speaker Duncan stood in front of the team, next to Speaker Rob, feeling a little uneasy. Because he had secretly written a letter to Lafayette before, saying that the current congressman in the city acquiesced to the land distribution under the pressure of Frost, and they were definitely loyal to the Republic. Now, this letter has become evidence of his treason. I don't know how General Frost will deal with him. If General Frost gets angry, his life will be over. He was just feeling uneasy, and suddenly someone shouted, "The general's troops are coming." Everyone looked in the distance and saw a team appearing on the horizon and heading this way. The team sang Ode to Rome while walking, and the spirit was obviously a team returning from a great victory. The band on the welcoming crowd also hurriedly played the Ode to Rome, and all the citizens sang together. Two groups of people approached during the singing, and suddenly someone exclaimed, "There's a prison car." The citizens who were just singing the Ode to Rome immediately talked about it. Duncan took a breath. He had good eyesight and saw clearly that the person in the prison car was probably Lafayette. Speaker Rob turned his head and asked, "Is the man on the prisoner car General Lafayette?" Duncan answered as if he had lost his soul, "Yes, it should be General Lafayette." Rob, speaking of which, the general sent a team back last night and built a platform in the municipal square overnight. I wonder if it is related to this. Duncan, no way. That platform looks like a whipping platform. Is he going to whip General Lafayette? That shouldn't be the case. This will tarnish the glory of his victory. That's right. The general tradition of this era is that even if you win, you won't kill the opponent's coach. The Battle of the Navy is even more exaggerated. The loser will hand over the sword to the winner, but the winner will immediately return the sword, and then both sides will drink a cup of wine together on the deck. Failure to do so will damage the glory of the winner and make the world spit on him. It is precisely because of this custom that the nobles can pass on from generation to generation despite so many wars in Europe. If it were an ordinary general, no one would doubt that General Lafayette would leave with dignity. But Frost was not an ordinary general. At this time, Frost led his officers to the welcoming citizens. He said, "Everyone, you are all gathered here to witness one thing. That is, I will publicly try Gilbert du Motier, Lafayette's full name, the instigator of the Champ de Mars massacre and the villain who brutally killed the soldiers who were owed wages." The citizens were in an uproar. Ning, take the prisoner to the town hall square. Chapter 148. Long live the Republic. The small town square was packed with people today. The small square was packed with Ning's 8,000 infantrymen, almost all of whom were here except for the wounded. There were more than 1,000 cavalrymen lined up on the surrounding roads, and the rest of the space was filled with civilians. Lafayette was sent directly to the platform set up overnight in the square and tied to the whipping rack. Originally, Ning wanted to repeat the caning punishment on Lafayette, that is, tie him to the wheel and beat him to death with a stick, but was stopped by Lazare Carnot. Lazare Carnot meant that he could be hanged in the end to pay for his life, and before that, he could just beat him a little bit to show his respect, and he couldn't offend all the nobles to death at once. Ning thought about it and felt that what Lazare Carnot said made sense. He couldn't tell Carnot that the French nobles were like rabbits with tails that couldn't grow long, and the Jacobins would come up and chop them all off in a few years, so he could only agree to the reasonable suggestion of the chief of staff. After Lafayette was tied up, Ning walked up to the execution platform and snapped his fingers. Then Lannes led 2 surrendered soldiers from Lafayette's army to the execution platform. One of these 2 was the man Lannes told Ning about yesterday, the one whose brother was beaten to death with sticks, and the other was a righteous man carefully selected by Ning. Ning glanced at Lannes and the 2 men, then turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 1789, 2 years ago, I personally led the citizens of Paris to storm the Bastille and ushered in this era of great revolution." As soon as Ning finished speaking, the soldiers below began to shout, "Long live the general!" Ning had to stop his speech and made several gestures to suppress the voices of the crowd. He continued, "But 2 years have passed. Tell me, are your lives better than before the revolution? During the revolution, you as citizens charged in the front, but your sisters, your wives, had to sell themselves for a living. We have obviously gotten rid of feudal obligations, but we are still penniless. In contrast, those high-ranking gentlemen are well-fed and well-drinking, with fat all around their mouths. They embezzled the fruits of the revolution, and then kicked us away. Not only that, they want to deal with us. Let us invite the first one out. This is a surrendered soldier from Lafayette's troops, and now they are members of the glorious Cantal National Guard. Let us ask him what Lafayette did to his brother." And Ning said as he grabbed the sleeve of the first surrendered soldier and pulled him to the front, facing the tens of thousands of fiery eyes below. The man stuttered, "My name is Mars, and my brother and I served in the 2nd Battalion, 2nd Regiment, 5th Brigade of the Paris National Guard. Shortly before leaving for Cantal, my brother protested to the superiors because his salary was not enough. You know, our military pay is paid with notes. In fact, notes are nothing. They can still be used in Paris, but they are useless. I don't know how to say it. Anyway, the price of bread has increased many times, sometimes once every 3 days, but our military pay is still the same as it was a year ago. So my brother went to protest, and protested with many soldiers. Then, this man pointed at my brother with his whip. Then my brother was arrested, and they tied my brother to the wheel and beat him to death." And Ning, before beating your brother to death, did General Lafayette specify what the crime was? Mars: "No. I definitely didn't." "What about the trial?" "No, absolutely not." Lafayette said angrily, "You are a soldier, and you mutinied. Do I need a reason to deal with you? Mutiny is the reason. Do you still need a trial?" And Ning took the executioner's whip, swung his hand and hit Lafayette hard with the whip. Lafayette howled in pain. "Ning, they are your soldiers, and they are also citizens. No one can torture a citizen without trial." After whipping a few times, Ning returned the whip to the executioner and turned to the crowd gathered in the square. "This is not all of Lafayette's sins. Let us invite a second witness." Lannes nodded to the second surrendered soldier. The surrendered soldier immediately took a few steps forward, walked to Ning's side, and said loudly, "I am Corporal Defoe of the 2nd Battalion, 1st Regiment, 3rd Brigade of the Paris National Guard." "Ning, what do you want to accuse?" "Corporal Defoe, what I want to accuse is what happened in July this year. In July of this year, the citizens of Paris gathered in the Champs-Élysées to celebrate the 2nd anniversary of the capture of the Bastille. This was a completely peaceful celebration." "Ning, are you sure it is a peaceful celebration?" "I swear, General Frost. Many people even came with the idea of going outing, and brought picnic baskets and tablecloths." "And Ning, are there any ladies at the scene?" "There are a lot of them, half of them are ladies." "And Ning, then what did Lafayette order you to do?" The sergeant stared at Lafayette, raised his finger and pointed at his nose, tears streaming from his eyes. He ordered us to disperse the crowd with bayonets and bullets." Lafayette roared, "It was a riot." "And Ning, bringing picnic baskets to riot? Bastard, whip him." The executioner raised his whip and Lafayette screamed, which made people think of a certain beast ancestor. After the whip hit several times, and Ning raised his hand and asked the executioners to stop. After Lafayette recovered, he immediately said, Maybe there are indeed some misunderstandings, but the situation in Paris was very urgent at the time. Moreover, the gentlemen of the Parliament also asked me to take decisive action to maintain order in Paris." "And Ning, are you saying that the gentlemen of the Parliament are also at fault?" "Who asked you to take action?" "Lafayette. It was decided by a vote of the Parliament. It was a secret ballot so no one knows who voted." "And Ning, then we will replace the Parliament later and let more qualified gentlemen enter the Parliament. But you are unforgivable. You must be held accountable today for the ladies and gentlemen who died tragically in the Champ de Mars massacre. Everyone present as a jury. If they are sure that you deserve to die, they will all shout for death." And Ning stopped, scanned the entire venue, and then his eyes fell on Napoleon below. Napoleon understood immediately and immediately shouted, "Death penalty." Then the entire square erupted with an overwhelming roar, "Death penalty." In fact, if you look closely, you will find that it was Ning's troops who were shouting. These people had just won a victory and were happy to hang the enemy commander to cheer them up. Amid the overwhelming shouts of death penalty, Lafayette's face turned pale. He stared at Ning. You can't do this. There has never been a battle where the commander of one side would be hanged after the battle. Ning, then start from here. First of all, you are responsible for the death of Mars's brother. You lynched him. 30 lashes. The executioner dipped the whip into salt water and began to whip. During the flogging, Ning turned to the crowd, and amid the sound of the whip, he said coldly, now is the time to change everything completely. I've seen enough of the starving people in the fields of France. I've seen enough. France is the France of all citizens, the France of the men in trousers, and the France of the farmers. If their lives have not improved, then it is wrong, and we have not done our job well. It just so happens that Louis V has also fled to a foreign country, exposing his traitorous nature. It's time for us to build a country without a king. A republic. A country for all French people. A country with freedom, equality, and fraternity in the true sense. And Ning announced so amid Lafayette's screams. As soon as he finished speaking, Napoleon, who understood him, shouted from below, "Long live the Republic!" So an overwhelming wave of long life the Republic surged across the square. And Ning always felt that this square would be called the Place de la République in the future. After the crowd quieted down again, the executioner said to Ning, "The flogging is over." And Ning nodded, "Choose a street lamp and hang Mr. Lafayette on it." At that time, there was no such convenient thing as the guillotine. Executioner, just a street lamp. And Ning, yes, this is also a tradition. 2 years ago, the peasants in the countryside sent their noble masters away by hanging them on street lamps. Several burly executioners immediately started to work, untied Lafayette from the whipping platform, and dragged him to the street lamp at the edge of the square. Lafayette screamed, "You can't do this to me. I am a marquis. A marquis registered with the Civil Service Bureau. I also have a territory. You can't do this to me." The executioner put a rope around his neck and then slowly hung him up on the lamppost. At first the marquis struggled, but soon he stopped moving. And Ning turned to Lazare Carnot and said, "Did you write down the speech I just made? Find an artist to sketch the picture of Lafayette hanging on the street lamp, and then send it to various major cities together with my speech and publish it in the newspapers." Chapter 149 Chaos. When the news of Lafayette's failure reached Paris, the whole of Paris was in an uproar. After the portrait of Lafayette being hanged and Frost's speech were reported back to Paris, they immediately caused widespread panic. The nobles and big businessmen who were still in Paris were so scared that they ran to the northeast border with their families, blocking all the ways out of the city. The target they fled to was obviously General Bouillé on the border, where King Louis V of France and his family were. It is said that on the way to escape, many nobles and big businessmen tore off the tricolor emblem and put on the iris emblem representing the Bourbon royal family. The National Assembly did not run away. The Girondists who controlled the parliament elected a new commander of the National Guard, Lucernard, to prepare for war and prepare to defend Paris. But just as Lucernard took office, the National Guard of Paris mutinied. The soldiers shouted the slogan "Long live General Frost," poured out of the barracks, and mixed with the trousers in Paris. The trouser wearers shouted slogans from General Frost's speech, shouting "Hang the traitors who stole the revolution and return the country to the citizens," filling the streets and alleys of Paris. A large group of self-defense forces and trouser wearers marched to the parliament and rushed to the parliament stands. Yes, at this time, the building where the parliament was located was still the same as when the Great Revolution just started, with stands, and even non-members of the parliament could come in and watch the parliament's proceedings. The trouser wearers occupied the stands, and every time a member of parliament came to the stage to give a speech, they shouted "Return the results to the citizens," making it impossible for the parliament to proceed. In this situation, Marat stood on the podium. "Gentlemen." When Marat said this, he looked directly at the trouser wearers and soldiers on the stands, as if he was giving a speech to them. "Gentlemen. At this time, we should really consider whether the resolution to identify General Frost as a traitor is correct." As soon as the voice fell, a member of parliament shouted, "Of course he is a traitor. He violated the basic spirit of the Constitution. Private property is sacred and inviolable." The audience in the stands immediately booed, suppressing the opinions that refuted Marat. After the booing subsided, Marat continued, "General Frost's speech did point out a problem, that is, ordinary citizens have gained too little benefit in the process of the Great Revolution." There was a cheer on the viewing stand. "Marat, some of you. I know. In the 2 years after the revolution, wealth has expanded tenfold. Especially Enget, you are a grain merchant, and you have a share of the increase in grain prices after the revolution. You lowered the purchase price in the countryside and raised the selling price in the city. And you colluded with the municipal officials in Paris to evade a large amount of market taxes. Look at you, each of you is full of fat intestines, but the trousers in the stands can't even afford new clothes because the price of cloth has also increased. There was another round of applause from the stands. Marat became more and more excited as he spoke. I think General Frost is absolutely right. It is because of you that people's lives have not gotten better or improved. This is not right. We must make changes to make everything in France better and let all French people enjoy the benefits of the revolution. I think now is a very good time. We should confiscate the property of those nobles and big businessmen who have fled and distribute them to the poor people in Paris and the rural land. Because we insist that private property is sacred and inviolable, we have formulated a redemption policy, but we never thought that the peasants have no money to redeem it. Frost himself was in the countryside, so he saw through this, and then he used the assignats to redeem the land and then distributed the land to the peasants. As a result, we voted for him and made him a traitor. He is not a traitor. He is clearly solving problems for us. I think that the term traitor should be abolished at this time. At the same time, referring to his approach, we should distribute land to peasants throughout France. The gentlemen of the parliament were in an uproar, but the people in the stands were cheering, which suppressed the voices of the gentlemen of the parliament. When the venue quieted down, a member of parliament stood up, pointed at Marat's nose and cursed, "You want us to abandon the principles established by the Constitution. Private property is inviolable, but..." The booing sounded again, and someone shouted, "Drag him out and hang him on the street lamp." The member of parliament was scared by this and sat down quickly. Marat, the Constitution also stipulates that we are a constitutional monarchy, and now the monarch has run away. I think today we should classify the king who colluded with foreign countries as a traitor. Then change it to a republic. Since it is a republic, the Constitution of the Kingdom of France is naturally invalid. As soon as the words fell, there was another round of applause from the stands, and the crowd began to shout, "Long live the Republic!" After quieting down again, Marat threw out his trump card: "If we don't change anything today, then when Frost returns to Paris, how do you think he will treat the parliament?" The members of parliament looked at each other. Marat: "So, I propose that we vote now to overturn the resolution that Frost is a traitor, and congratulate him on eliminating Lafayette, the leader of the constitutional monarchy who has been holding the parliament hostage. At the same time, invite him to return to Paris as soon as possible to deal with the rebellious General Bouillet." While Paris was in chaos, Ning was reorganizing the troops in Quinta. After he executed Lafayette, most of Lafayette's troops who had surrendered expressed their willingness to join him. In addition, there were also Lafayette's troops that had been scattered, but after receiving the news, they stopped fleeing and turned around and ran back. Ning gave the task of reorganizing these troops to Lazare Cano. Lazare Cano was good at this. After all, in real history, he helped the Republic to implement military reforms and organized a strong army of 700,000. His nickname was the Organizer of Victory. But even Lazare Cano encountered huge difficulties in reorganizing these troops. Because Ning had hung Lafayette on the street lamp, the old aristocratic officers did not dare to come to Ning for surrender. As a result, many soldiers from the troops came to surrender, and the non-commissioned officers were corrupt. There are only soldiers, but no generals. Even Lazare Cano could not create non-commissioned officers who could lead a rapidly expanding army. It takes time to train non-commissioned officers from ordinary soldiers. Moreover, Ning had previously treated the teaching team as a night attack team. As a result, only 30% of the original teaching team returned after the night attack. There were not enough people to force them to become non-commissioned officers. In short, Ning's officers have been busy with reorganization these days. Not to mention marching into Paris, they can't move at all in Quinta. So Ning can be said to be passively watching the situation in Quinta. There was very bad news from Austria. Because Louis V successfully escaped from Paris, the nobles who were originally driven out of the country by the Great Revolution gathered in Austria, passing through Austria and Bavaria to the northeastern border of France. Now General Bouillet on the northeastern border has assembled a very impressive royalist army. Then Queen Marie ran back to her mother's home. Now 2 Austrian armies are gathered on the border. One is in Italy, led by General Bulla, and is ready to attack southern France through Nice and Provence and Milan. One is east of Bavaria, led by General Wurmser, ready to intervene at any time. In addition, Frederick the Great of Prussia finally surrendered, and the new Prussian King Frederick William II was also eager to intervene in France. The Prussian army, led by Karl William Ferdinand, Duke of Brunswick, had also moved to the border. In addition, the British movement was also worrying. The news from Toulon was that the Royal Navy's cruisers appeared on the sea outside Toulon several times. And Ning summarized this information and felt that the situation was a little bit pessimistic. However, while he was worrying about these, a painter came all the way from Paris to visit him. Chapter 150 General Frost leads us to victory. When Ning heard Fanny's report, he was a little hesitant. Painter. I don't have much friendship with painters. It's true. And Ning knew a lot of people in Paris, including poets and musicians, but few painters. And Ning, who? Fanny, the name he reported is Jacques-Louis David. The officers present looked at each other. And Ning, I know him. Let him wait in the reception room. I'm in a military meeting here. And Ning certainly knew who this person was, not because he was familiar with the history of European painting and knew that this person was the founder of the French neoclassicism, but because this guy painted too many famous historical paintings related to the Great Revolution. For example, the famous Death of Marat. Another example is the famous Napoleon crossing the St. Bernard Pass in the Alps. Yes, it is the most famous image of Napoleon riding a horse. This great painter came to visit, so he had to give him some face. Napoleon, painter, it's a good opportunity to ask him to paint the scene of you, General, rushing towards the enemy alone. That scene is definitely worth recording. And Ning waved her hand. It's not time to paint my portrait yet. According to the intelligence we have collected now, we may face continuous wars in the future. Napoleon, what are you worried about, General? We have won such a dangerous battle, and we will surely continue to win victories in the future. Napoleon was indeed very confident, and this did not change in the time and space. Davout, I don't think we need to worry too much. We have more troops now, although we don't have officers. Cano also agreed. Recently we have recruited nearly 10,000 people, all of whom are experienced veterans. Although there are no officers. And Ning, you don't have to repeatedly emphasize that there are no officers. Cano continued, in fact, it is much better than I expected. Although the killing of Lafayette has caused many noble officers to dare not come to surrender, your record is too outstanding, and the soldiers have been vividly describing you rushing to the enemy alone, and there are still many officers who come to surrender for your military exploits. But as soon as they heard that there are still the Knights of the Afterglow composed of old officers, they all asked to join the Knights of the Afterglow. I think under the current circumstances, we should disband the Knights of the Afterglow and incorporate the officers into the army. And Ning shook his head. No, the old nobles will still conflict with the awakened soldiers. Not everyone can be loved by civilian soldiers like Davout. Napoleon, maybe it's because his bald head looks very much like his father. The officers laughed together. Davout cursed and punched Napoleon. And Ning always felt that Davout seemed to have a much better impression of Napoleon since that battle. Maybe it was because Napoleon's artillery and the 1st Brigade fought on the ridge line together. After laughing, and Ning clapped his hands. In short, today's military meeting ends here. The main task is to continue to reorganize the army and prepare for the next war. Okay, let's disband. The officers saluted and Ning together, and then filed out of the study. And Ning rang the bell and called Fanny in. Let the painter come in. Fanny nodded, turned and left. A moment later, he let a middle-aged man and a young man in. The young man also moved a huge canvas. The middle-aged man was very excited when he entered the door. General Frost, I finally see you. And Ning, hello. The middle-aged man, I have always wanted to paint your heroic figure charging into battle, but you didn't leave a portrait in Paris. I couldn't find any reference at all, so I had to come to you directly. As a painter, I must leave the image of the most outstanding hero of contemporary France on the canvas. This is my duty. And Ning, there is no canvas in Paris, probably because no painter wants to paint the son of a shoemaker. The middle-aged man laughed. We are all idiots, blinded by our identity. After the revolution, we realized that identity means nothing. A hero does not care about his origin. And Ning smiled, then asked politely, well, you haven't introduced yourself yet. Oh, sorry, I was so excited that I forgot about this. I am Jacques-Louis David, and I painted Brutus executing his son. I am quite famous in Paris. And Ning thought to himself, Of course I know what you painted, and I also know that you will paint the death of Mara in the future, but that is the original history. Now history has gone off track, and I don't know if this painting will appear." David excitedly turned to the canvas that the young man had just brought in. "I painted this painting based on the description of the defeated soldiers who fled back to Paris. Because there is no portrait of you and I have never seen you, I did not paint your face, but only the horse and the background. Please take a look. I named General Frost leads us to victory." David personally lifted the white cloth covering the surface of the canvas. And Ning almost laughed when he saw the painting. The painting looked exactly like Napoleon crossing the St. Bernard Pass in the Alps, but the face was not painted. David explained enthusiastically, "I painted the scene of you rushing towards 40,000 enemy troops alone. At first I was going to paint a distant view, but later I found that it was not enough to highlight your heroic figure. And Ning, in fact, I did not rush towards the 40,000 enemy troops. What happened on the battlefield was that we first dispersed the 20,000 people who rushed up, and then Lafayette gathered the scattered troops and rushed up with the 20,000 people in reserve. The total number was probably between 20,000 and 30,000. It won't be more than 30,000 people." David opened his mouth wide. "Even if it is 30,000, it is not a number that can be said lightly, right?" And Ning, at that time, the enemy was like a frightened bird because of the continuous actions of our army. The translation system translated frightened bird into Latin. And Ning, so my charge was not as dangerous as imagined. I rushed out to boost the morale of my army. My army was following behind me at that time." "David, is that so?" And Ning continued, "In addition, I didn't rush out alone, there was a flag bearer behind me. Instead of a composing like this, why not do it like this?" And Ning picked up a notepad from the table and roughly drew the composition of Liberty leading the people on it. And Ning, of course, the actual scene is not like this. I am riding a horse, and I am not holding a flag, but these can be artistically processed. Pay attention, the flag is the most important. You should draw the flag in the most eye-catching position. It's not me who leads my soldiers, it's freedom that leads them, understand? So you should highlight me in this painting, understand? I'm just an insignificant general." David was deeply moved. "I've heard that you are very humble, and now I see that it's true. But please allow me to finish this painting. When I painted him, I felt your heroism. I want to convey it." And Ning had no choice but to nod. "Okay, you can finish it." He sat on the table and posed. "Come on, you can sketch it with a pencil now." David was overjoyed. "Okay. I'll draw it now. Of course, I will also draw the composition you just mentioned later." And Ning nodded. David began to sketch with a pencil on the blank part of the canvas. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. "Come in." Napoleon opened the door and rushed in. "Hey, Andy. A Hussar unit has arrived. They say they are here to join you, and their commander is asking for a meeting." And Ning raised his eyebrows. "Hussars? What's the commander's name?" He said his name is Antoine Louis Charles Lassalle. Napoleon said. And Ning almost suspected that he had heard it wrong. "Who? Oh my goodness, the king of Hussars, Davout's savior is here?" End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.